in their avatar's body.
In Elder Scrolls Online, you get to play as whoever you want to play. You are in control of everything from your character's face to their hair to their arteries. We're not just going to give you some pre-made bones and ligaments. You get to create the musculoskeletal system that's right for you. You can even alter the DNA.
Are all of these changes just cosmetic?
No, not at all. They have a huge effect on game playing. If your character's body has any anatomical flaws, they could die immediately.
Beta testers say that designing every aspect of their character is a compelling experience.
I've been designing my orc's liver for 5 hours now. This is awesome.
Designing the hands is the hardest part. I keep having to look up how all the joints connect.
Players can also press the randomize button to get a completely random collection of body parts.
This is the Onion News Network.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. You can join the show here and bring up whatever you want to discuss. All you got to do is dial in. The number here is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. You're in the studio tonight. It's Ian and Chris. Chris, let me turn you up a little bit. You're a little too quiet.
And Chris.
That would be helpful if I hit the right microphone. Now I think we got
Chris.
it right. Okay,
there we go.
Now I can hear you.
All right.
All right, we got a lot of interesting news and updates here. Updates on previous stories that we have covered. And I want to make sure we can get that out of the way here first up and foremost, and that is the library case update. But we're going to talk about, coming up, the latest attack on privacy by the federal government's whatever U.S. representatives or whoever it is that's sponsoring looks like an absolutely awful bill called the Stop CSAM Act. And we'll tell you what that stands for and what they're going to do here, according to the Electronic Freedom Foundation? No, Electronic Frontier. Damn it, what does it stand for? EFF.
Frontier, yeah.
Frontier Foundation. Did it used to be Freedom at one time and they changed it? Well, anyway.
I'm pretty sure it's always been Electronic Frontier Foundation.
Yeah, I think you're right. All right, so we'll get into that coming up here in a little bit. But an update on the library case. Just moments before the show started, there was an update that came through the PACER system, which is the federal government's online court filing system. If you follow, there's a website called Court Listener and a handy little app called Recap, which is PACER spelled backwards. So if you are interested in following different court cases online, you have to get into Recap as a plugin for anybody that visits PACER. It'll download automatically what you pay, because you have to pay PACER 10 cents a page or whatever to look at court filings. So what Recap does is whenever you download a file from PACER, it uploads it to this Recap system, which is also known as courtlistener.com. And then they store it, and then they serve it up for free. So anybody who looks for that file after the first person with the app that downloads it, or the plugin for browsers like Chrome or Firefox, then they don't have to pay for it. So it's a pretty sweet thing if you ever get into the federal system. You can also just go to courtlistener.com and follow certain cases on there. And one of the ones I'm following is the SEC versus library. We've been following this case as closely as we can. You've been to a hearing, Chris. I've been to a hearing. I think you've been to more than one.
Yeah. I think it was all of them, if I'm not mistaken. There weren't that many.
Well, there's been a lot of filings, that's for sure.
Yeah, a lot of filings,
argumentation. And Library, unfortunately, has lost. For those that don't know, Library is a decentralized protocol. And remember, the difference between a protocol and a platform or a program is a protocol is a set of code that is sort of like open source. It's the lowest level that you can interact with on the internet. So, for instance, HTTPS, that thing that you see in front of every web URL, the P in that stands for protocol. FTP, File Transfer Protocol. These are things that anyone who's writing a program can utilize said protocol to communicate with other people in some way. Am I describing this correctly so far? Okay, so Library is a media sharing protocol. It is a way for you to upload, could be a video, could be an MP3, could be a PDF file, could be something else. You upload it to the, actually host it from your server. You're not actually uploading it. You host it from your own computer, your laptop or your desktop computer or whatever, running the LBRY software, and then it is available. And what LBRY is a blockchain that helps index the different files that are available through this protocol. Okay, so LBRY allows a decentralized method of file sharing. The old ways of doing this would have been like you would put a torrent online that would host a certain file or movie or something like that, and then you'd have to put that torrent in certain centralized servers like the Pirate Bay that were always being targeted by governments of the world trying to take down these centralized servers hosting the torrents. Even though the servers weren't hosting the pirated files or whatever, they were still being targeted because they had the torrents that sort of pointed to those files. LBRY has a blockchain which is decentralized. It's a ledger that exists in thousands of locations all at once, just like kind of like Bitcoin, except with a different purpose. And it became somewhat popular. Like, it became this alternative to YouTube. And it's not per se for piracy. I just want to make that clear. There's a lot of original content on LBRY. Anyone can upload whatever they want to the service, though, and there's nothing that can be done to stop it because it is a protocol. It is not a platform. There's not a central manager who decides this is okay, this is bad, this is okay, this is bad. They can't do that. There is no central control over it. And that is why the system hates LBRY. That is why YouTube, these big centralized video systems, the federal government likely hate LBRY. And so they targeted the LBRY Foundation, or the LBRY Company. I guess there's two different organizations. So there's LBRY the protocol. There's LBRY the company, which has a board of directors and a CEO and all
there's
that.
An organization behind the protocol, and then there's another company called LBRY.
Correct. There's the LBRY Foundation, which is a non-for-profit or something like that. I'm not sure how it's organized. Then there's the company that has been doing some of the programming for LBRY. It had its founder, Jeremy Kauffman, who's a Free State Project early mover. He lives here in New Hampshire in the Manchester area. He's one of the board of directors, I think, at the Free State Project as we speak. So they targeted LBRY, and they being the federal government's SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, with their usual claim that when they came after LBRY hadn't been claimed that many times, but since then they brought this case against a bunch of different cryptocurrency companies.
It's interesting to say usual claim because it's something that there's all these different federal organizations and they're all making sort of different claims. But a particular organization might be making the same claim repeatedly, but a lot of these claims, they didn't do it right away. They waited many, many years. Like in the LBRY case, I think it was 5 years before they brought a case.
Yep. And in this case, it is the claim that the LBRY token, which is the, if you will, the fuel that makes the system run. Whenever you upload a video, you have to spend a little bit of the LBRY coin, or what do they call it? LBRY token? I forget what they call it. LBRY coin, LBC is what its code online acronym is. Anyway, the LBRY coin is the guts of the system. That's how the things sort of move. Whenever you make a change to a blockchain, you have to pay some small fee. It's a very, very small amount that you would have to pay. The SEC said this is a security. Now, a security is supposed to be something that gives you some kind of say, right? Like you got a stock, you can vote.
It's not really because
no, it's
not. Can I may?
Please, of course.
So, I mean, basically, you're not when you there are stocks, like you can own stock in LBRY, the company, okay?
You could,
which is a separate entity, right? And the LBRY coins, they're not stock in a company.
No, they don't give you voting rights.
They're just I'm trying to think how they phrased it, or how you would phrase it. It's
you don't get dividends.
Yeah, right. There's no benefit to holding them, beyond its utility.
Could go up in value.
It's utility. It's what they call a utility token.
Yeah. Basically, the federal government went after them because they said, well, you had some of these tokens because they started the company, right? Or they started the protocol. They had access to early mining, right? Like they had a bunch of tokens. They had millions of these LBRY coins, and they gave a bunch of them away. And the SEC said giving away tokens is illegal distribution of securities, or whatever terminology they use for that. Not even selling them.
Even though there was never a promise, nobody ever suggested that,
apparently somebody somewhere suggested it.
Well, not library, though. The only time that it happened sort of with library was like in a private email between two individuals, like with one of the employees. It's absolutely crazy because it was never marketed that way by the company or by even library, the nonprofit.
Right. But they came after him, and they said it
didn't matter.
They said it's a security. Never ended up going to a jury. It was summary judgment, I think was the terminology, where essentially both sides agreed to the facts in the case, and it just ended up becoming a question of law, so they didn't go to a jury. It was decided by a judge here in New Hampshire at the Federal District Court, and that judge decided in favor of the SEC. So now they're in this stage of things where there's a penalty. Okay, so this is the part of the final end. This is the end of the tunnel is within sight. Not that there's going to be anything after the tunnel.
So something to note here too is that this is a civil case that was brought by the SEC, not criminal.
Not criminal.
Yeah,
that's correct.
So it's a little bit different than the Crypto6 case.
Yes, exactly. But what the SEC wants to do is destroy library, and they've basically done it. There are no more employees. All there is left now is Jeremy Kauffman. He's the CEO. And they hit him at the very end of this case with a series of demands for more discovery. So as though they haven't been brutalized enough, the entire company has been shut down essentially at this point.
It's like a personal vendetta at this point against Jeremy Kauffman because the company's gone. It's already out of business.
Pretty much. Yeah. Pretty much. There is no more business to be done with library. They have no more money.
Employees were fired, as I understand it. There's nothing left financially to take.
They have no money. And in fact, the SEC in its filing today, in a 4-page filing, a supplemental brief on remedies where they recommend to the court what they want the court to do. Right? These lawyers do this. They make a document. They say, here you go, judge. Just sign this piece of paper and we'll be good and all set. Here's what we think you should do. They want to extract a civil penalty of $111,614 from the library company. I don't know if they have any kind of money left to pay that, but that's what they want.
They've already revealed their assets, and it was like not even enough to pay
bucks,
like an employee salary for like a week.
They want an injunction that would restrain library from violating the Securities Act because they claim that library has not yet destroyed its library coin holdings, and it has not yet, quote-unquote, dissolved the company. And they say library has promised to do these things, but since they haven't done that yet, they need to be enjoined from violating the Securities Act, because in theory they could go crazy and start selling tokens again, right? Which they wouldn't obviously do, but that's what the SEC wants. They do make a point here of withdrawing their prior request for what they call disgorgement. And this is, as I understand it, disgorgement is like, how much money can we get out of these people? In addition to the penalty, right? So there's already the civil penalty that they want of $111,000. Disgorgement would be in addition to that, what we can get. And they actually admit here in this filing that there's nothing to get. Right. That's the reason they're withdrawing the disgorgement, is because library has been completely destroyed as a company. It's over. So that's pretty much their proposal at this point. I mean, I'm boiling down the 4 pages here. And so the next step, I guess, will be for the judge to rule on this, and then presumably library will shut down its operations as a company. But that doesn't mean that library's future is terminated, right? Because the blockchain continues. The blockchain, as long as there's a couple people mining, as long as there's a couple people out there that support this chain, it will continue. And Odyssey is still out there. It's a very popular platform that was launched sort of based on library. It's expanded to be more of a centralized service since then, but it does still have library in the background.
One of the questions I am now asking myself is, they wanted to target both effectively, one of the things they were arguing is that they were targeting both, I guess, the foundation and the company, but I don't think they did target the foundation. But that was sort of what their judgment, they were asking for a judgment on, I think. And they sort of wanted to include anybody and everybody, including any ventures that like Jeremy Kauffman might start, or anybody relating to Jeremy and library, the company.
Was the foundation related to him, or was that unrelated to him.
Well,
I don't know enough about it.
I just know that this was sort of argued, I believe, in the courtroom, that effectively the government, SEC, wanted them to enjoin basically anybody connected to the library from basically like starting it up again.
I know they wanted to go after Odyssey. I remember that part. I don't remember the details about the foundation. Anyway, there's nothing about the foundation in this filing, at least, as far as what they want the judge to.
Okay, so it sounds like
do.
they've accepted that it's only going to be the company.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
Seems
okay.
like it. Because they didn't ask to do anything to Odyssey. They didn't mention the foundation. Odyssey gets a mention in here, but not in the terms of we want to destroy Odyssey. At least that's not what I read here.
Maybe you can clarify something. The company, is that Odyssey? Because I thought the Odyssey was
a separate company.
A separate company
Odyssey
from the foundation? Because I thought the Odyssey was
Odyssey
the company.
came from the Library Corporation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, which is what's targeted here, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
but
I guess
Odyssey was spun off as its own separate corporation. At one time, it was a subsidiary.
Okay.
It no longer is.
Okay. All right. So there's now so there's sort of three entities then. So there's Library, the company, then there's a spinoff called Odyssey,
correct.
And then there is the foundation. Okay. So that makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah, I don't think anything's going to happen to the foundation here. I don't know if they have anything for the SEC to target anyway. I suspect if they did, they probably would be targeted in some way. But I just wanted to give you guys the update on that in case you've been curious about what's been happening with Library. It's been a few months since they had their last court hearing, and court things don't move quickly. So that's the update. And we will, of course, keep you in the loop as that continues to develop. If there are any more hearings that we can attend, I'm sure that we will do so to follow up on this story, because it is, as of right now, the latest loss for the cryptocurrency industry as far as the SEC targetings. We still have not gotten the word on what's going on with the Ripple lawsuit. That was the big one, right? Like, Library didn't get the same level of press attention within the crypto community as the Ripple lawsuit. So the SEC has been targeting Ripple, which is one of the top cryptos out there. And in that case, the judge has heard the arguments, and they're waiting on the judge's ruling in that case. So that's what's going on there.
I don't recall what the difference was in the defense, but I recall there being a different path that
yeah, I think so. I think so.
took.
I don't either.
So it'll definitely be interesting to see what happens with that case.
Yep, a lot of eyes are on that case as well. It would be nice for the SEC to lose one, but these are federal judges, so
we'll see.
The odds that they're going to rule against their own guys are pretty low. Meanwhile, the SEC has continued to go after various different organizations. We saw them going after Bittrex recently, which was another cryptocurrency exchange that had announced that they were going to be shutting down their operations in the United States, and then literally within, I think, 24 to 48 hours of making that announcement, Bittrex was targeted by the SEC. And now, in a quick update on that story from Reuters, just a few days ago, Bittrex has now filed for bankruptcy on Monday this week, 3 weeks after the SEC accused it of operating an unregistered securities exchange. Bittrex ceased operations in the United States on April 30th and said its bankruptcy filing would not impact its global company, which serves customers outside of the United States. Its non-U.S. operations are based in Liechtenstein. And then it goes on to talk about their assets and all that stuff. So they claim that they have plenty of assets and that this was some sort of, I don't know, legal tactic. I don't know what all the details are on how bankruptcies can protect companies in certain legal situations, but that's what they ultimately decided to do. So it's not good news. Obviously, they have no future in the United States. And speaking of companies that have no future in North America, Binance, which is the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange by volume and market cap, just announced today they're pulling out of Canada. So if you were a Binance user in Canada, you're done.
We hear about the United States a lot. It's interesting.
Same crap's going on up there.
It doesn't surprise me, but at the same time, it's
interesting because we hear so much about the U.S., but Canada.
Canada's been doing the same stuff. We just don't hear about it as often because we're not in the thick of it up there. But they've been targeting crypto exchanges. Remember, I'm sure you remember during the trucker protests.
Oh yeah,
they actually tried to outlaw. They used like an emergency order to outlaw certain Bitcoin addresses.
Yes,
and ordered all of the Bitcoin exchanges based in Canada to refuse to do business with anyone who is using those Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever addresses. So I believe some exchanges in Canada have closed, but I'm not 100% certain on that. If you've been following that story of the Canadian situation closely and you want to give us an update on what's going on up there, because I think it's the same tactics, is to go after the crypto exchanges, scare as many people out of the business as possible, scare as many people out of the country as far as businesses, crypto businesses as possible, and just create a climate of fear surrounding cryptocurrency.
Fear and uncertainty, because businesses do not like fear and they don't like uncertainty.
Yep, exactly right. So we're going to continue to keep you up to date on this as it develops. Of course, if you want to weigh in, you can join the show. The number here is 603-283-6160. Let's see. I feel like I had another update. Oh, yeah. Since we're talking about the SEC, I mentioned this briefly last night, but we just didn't get a chance to talk about it. If you recall, Chris, I think it was on one of the shows you were on, we talked about how the SEC, after going after LBRY, after going after the Ripple, after now threatening cryptocurrency exchanges, if you remember, they went after a cryptocurrency exchange because they were offering staking services. Yeah. And that was Kraken, one of the largest cryptocurrency exchanges out there. Kraken said, we're just not going to fight this. We'll just pay $30 million and shut down our staking service. And we kind of explained, staking is this alternative to mining that allows people to stake their coins. They hold their coins in a special way that accrues interest. Basically, it accrues new coins into their wallet, and it helps them validate transactions in that blockchain. So it's a different way of kind of running a blockchain. And anyone can do staking with like a laptop or a desktop computer, but it's still a little complicated. You still have to run a full node of the software, and your average grandma may not be able to handle that kind of thing. But these online services would allow someone to just simply click a button and say, stake my coins, and then boom, done. And then they start earning coins because Kraken handled all the work for you. Well, they said that is an illegal security. And Kraken, again, doesn't agree, but they're not willing to fight it. Coinbase has apparently been accused of the same thing by the SEC, even though the case hasn't been brought quite yet. They've received what's called a Wells notice, and that's a notice from the SEC saying, we're going to sue you. We have to let you know that we're going to sue you, so we're going to sue you. This is here you go. And so that's coming, purportedly, and the belief is they're going to go after Coinbase for their staking service as well. And the thing that I predicted when we saw this news was if they can go after staking and call staking a security, they're going to go after miners. Even though none of this stuff makes any sense as a security, they're just throwing it up against a wall, and they want to see if it sticks in front of a federal judge. That's what they're doing here. So now, guess what? They're going after a mining operation. And we're going to tell you more about that coming up here in a moment. The number is 603-283-6160. This may be the beginning of their latest round of attacks against the cryptocurrency industry, because it's probably not going to stop at just one company.
Definitely not.
603-283-6160 will tell you which company and what is supposedly going on here with the SEC's latest attack. And then coming up, we'll get into online privacy. It's under attack as well.
This is novelist Tom Robbins. When my mother was diagnosed with glaucoma, her conservative Virginia physician told her there was only one treatment that might ease her pain and save her eyesight. That treatment was medical marijuana, which he could not prescribe. I offered to get her some and teach her how to use it effectively, but my father objected because marijuana was against the law. So my mother, who loved to read and walk in nature, was condemned to grow cruelly, unnecessarily blind. Tragedies like this happen all the time, but they don't have to keep happening. To learn more about medical marijuana, call the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Elon Musk has named a veteran media executive to replace him as CEO of Twitter. The billionaire who bought the company last year for $44 billion says Linda Yaccarino will start the job in around 6 weeks' time. FSN Silicon Valley correspondent Ira Spitzer has more.
Linda Yaccarino steps into the top job at Twitter after 12 years at NBC Universal, where she served as head of advertising. In a tweet announcing Yaccarino's appointment, Musk says she will focus primarily on business operations while he shifts to product design and new technology. The billionaire Tesla CEO has had a tumultuous tenure since purchasing the social media platform last October and taking it private. He's laid off almost 3/4 of the company's staff and overseen a chaotic rollout of a new paid subscription service. Daniel Penny, the man accused of choking a homeless man to death on the New York subway, has been charged with second-degree manslaughter. The 24-year-old Marine veteran handed himself over to police on Friday morning. FSN's Jody Jacobs has more from court in New York.
In a short court appearance, Daniel Penny was charged and then released on $100,000 cash bail and ordered to turn over his passport. Penny is the man seen in a viral video choking Jordan Neely to death on board a train. Neely was a subway performer who was homeless. According to witnesses, he was begging for food and acting erratically. The performer's death sparked several protests here in New York City as people called on authorities to arrest Penny. If found guilty, the Marine veteran could face up to 15 years in prison. He will be back in court again on July 17. Jody Jacobs, New York.
An uneasy calm remains at the US southern border with Mexico after the pandemic-era policy Title 42, used to expel millions of asylum seekers, came to an end. The Biden administration has now set out sweeping new rules, opening up some alternative routes for immigrants while bringing in regulations meant to deter illegal crossings. FSN's Benji Hire reports from El Paso in Texas on the US-Mexico border.
There are approximately 60,000 people waiting to cross into the United States from Mexico, with the Department of Homeland Security warning of difficult days ahead. But the scene on the US side, at least for now, is one of calm, of order. Law enforcement personnel here insisting they have the tools they need to prepare for a potential influx. Nonetheless, El Paso remains in a state of emergency, as do many other cities along the border.
Pakistan's ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan has been granted bail for 2 weeks after being arrested earlier this week on corruption charges. His arrest has been called unlawful by the country's Supreme Court. From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. You can join the show here. You can bring up anything you want to discuss. And I do want to say thank you to listeners like Elephant in the Room, who is a Free Talk Live supporter of our AMPS program. AMPS stands for Advertise, Market, Promote, and Support. Elephant in the Room is a silver level supporter. And that means that Elephant in the Room is contributing $5 a month, which is what we ask. So we certainly appreciate it. It helps us advertise, market, promote, and support Free Talk Live to get the word out about the ideas of liberty, peace, privacy, cryptocurrency, some of the things we talk about a lot here on Free Talk Live, which we're going to get into privacy here in a little bit and the latest attack on that. Kind of all of this is in a way, an attack on privacy, right? Because an attack on the cryptocurrency world is also attack on privacy to some extent, even though a lot of these blockchains are public.
You know what it is? It's an attack on control and privacy. And the privacy thing, I don't even know. They almost haven't even started attacking that yet. Only a little bit in like looking at exchanges and being like, you better remove the privacy coins. But
they've done that too. Yeah, that's a good point. That was a little while back, years ago that they. In fact, it was Bittrex, the very same company that just filed for bankruptcy, that they put some pressure on, I think quietly. And then Bittrex, remember Bittrex announced, must have been 5 years ago, oh yeah, we're just going to get rid of Monero and Dash, and they like had this list of what they consider to be privacy coins, and they dumped them out because they were scared of something. So if you want to comment, you can join the show here. The number is 603-283-6160. We were talking about some updates of various different stories. Bittrex filing for bankruptcy, the Library Corporation being targeted by the SEC, and the penalty that the SEC wants, which is over $100,000. They gave up on their disgorgement, so-called requests. So those are a quick recap for you. But what we were talking about is this attack against a Bitcoin miner, or at least the preface to an attack. So they have subpoenaed, according to theblock.co, which is one of the Bitcoin news sites, a company called Marathon Digital is a U.S.-based Bitcoin mining company. They said this week they have received a subpoena from the Securities and Exchange Commission regarding an ongoing investigation tied to a mining facility in Montana. According to its May 10th filing, the SEC, quote, may be investigating. Of course they're investigating. That's exactly why they're subpoenaing. They may be investigating whether or not there may have been any violation of the federal securities law, said the filing. Marathon says it's cooperating with the agency. They received an initial subpoena back in November of 2021. Quote, on October 6, 2020, the company entered into a series of agreements with multiple parties to design and build a data center for up to 100 megawatts in Hardin, Montana, which we used to be on the air there. In conjunction therewith, the company filed a current report on whatever form the firm said today that discloses that pursuant to a data facility services agreement, the company issued 6 million shares of restricted common stock in transactions exempt from registration under the Securities Act. The latest subpoena was received on April 10th. So I guess what they're suggesting here is that maybe their stock issuance was related to an unregistered security, maybe. But it's awfully curious that they're going after a mining corporation here. So we don't know what the SEC's angle is on this yet. They're just saying, okay, give us all your papers. We want to see all your internal documents. We want to see, your emails. Turn it over so we can find something to charge you with, is essentially what's going on here.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah. So if you are a mining company in the United States, you should be on alert right now. If it's happening to Marathon Digital, we don't know what it is exactly. We just know an investigation is happening. You better believe they probably have their eyes on you as well. And I'm not saying you got to shut down, but
even if, it's interesting, even if they are not targeting them for somehow mining being a security, your legal stuff as far as your shares and issuances and how you operate the company is potentially going to be used against you if you're a mining corporation, because you're probably being targeted because you're a mining corporation, not necessarily because of the structure of they're just looking for something.
Sure. They want something.
Yeah. And if they can't go after you for what you're doing, they're going to, as far as the actual mining is concerned, they're going to go after you for something else. And
or
what else
all of
is
the
there?
above,
right?
Maybe they're
possibly
they're cooking up a huge case where they're going to come at it from different angles. But this is one to keep an eye on, that's for sure.
Well, we already know they're coming at it from different angles. I mean, you've got every three-letter organization at the federal level trying to figure out how they can go after anybody connected to crypto.
So that's the update for you there. The number here, if you want to join us, 603-283-6160. It's not to say that individual miners have much to fear.
Probably not.
If you're just running a mining rig in your basement or wherever, then they probably don't know about it. You're too small fry for them to waste their time with. They want to get millions of dollars. They're after the money. And they're after creating this fear, this aura of fear that's going to come over the entire industry and run people out of the United States. It's going to run entrepreneurs. It's going to run creative programmer types out of the United States to whatever the safer jurisdictions are for cryptocurrency. I don't know what those are, but they're out there. It's going to be smaller countries. I don't think El Salvador is a great place to go, but they're certainly talking about being a safer place for cryptocurrency there. whether it be the St. Kitts and Nevis, which is welcoming a lot of Bitcoin Cash action down there, or some other country I haven't heard about yet. If you've heard about one and you want to weigh in, you can. Let's go to Ricky from the Commonwealth. He's calling us from Pennsylvania. Go ahead, Ricky.
Thank you there, Brother Ian. I love you. Brother Chris, good evening.
What's on your mind?
Well, this one's for Richard. Now, I'm going to be 35. Yeah, Richard, that wonderful caller that keeps calling about mental health background checks.
Oh, this is the guy that wants to do, he wants to put psychologists in charge of whether or not someone can buy a gun legally in the United States.
Yeah, the man's a comedian. Here's why. I'm going to be turning 50 December 25th of this year. Now, it took a while here in the Commonwealth for the FFL garbage to creep in and take over and, like, ruin everything. But here's how it was when I was a kid growing up. First of all, I had my dad's Remington 600 pump loaded in my hands at 5. And at that time growing up, you know, during all the years of me growing up, you know, if you wanted to buy a gun, there was no background check. There was no ATF form. Here's things that were different. You could be crazy. You could be a felon. You could be a domestic abuser. Now, as far as use, like if I would have wanted one, it would have been easy because the gun shop was at the end of the block where I grew up. You know, my dad, say at 10 years old, if I wanted a Colt, like I ultimately got, all he would have to do was go to the gun shop, say to the gun shop owner, say, hey, my son would like to have a gun. And give me permission, there you go. You can get a handgun. You know, things were really different then. And, you know, you didn't have all these problems and that. This is what Richard don't understand. I don't know how old he is. You know, because he says all his life he had a gun. He sounds
about your age.
Yeah, well, then he's a joker because the way it used to be is the way it should be. Our Section 21 was absolute then. The people have the right to bear arms in defense of themselves and the state. This shall not be questioned. Nobody questioned it. You know, when I was a kid grow in the house, you know, not only to have my old man shotgun in my hands, but there was other guns and rifles in the gun cabinet. The ammo's there. We had in the house, in a specific place, a loaded .25 caliber revolver. There was no problem. Everybody had guns. You know, there was not these issues. You know, what he doesn't understand is it's not the gun. Okay, it's the way it's being presented. I hate to say it by the Republicans and the NRA and all these guys in the gun lobby. They're glorifying a particular weapon, and, you know, people are using that weapon, unfortunately.
You know, this is nothing new. This is the government has been using the guise of safety to argue to take away your freedoms. It's not specifically guns. They've just been, you know, yes, they're focused on guns at the moment, but they've been doing it for hundreds of years. I mean, from driver's licenses that were actually started out of bigotry, not safety as many want to try and suggest today. It was bigotry against motor vehicle drivers is how driver's license started. Vehicle registration.
It's unconstitutional. The driver's license is unconstitutional.
Yeah, I mean, you can argue it. Supreme Court disagrees, but nonetheless. But
well,
you know,
that's another story for another night. Chris.
It is, but they keep going, and it got to a point where it's you know, your I want to say your safety belt, your seat belt, right? Mandatory seat belts, but it was only supposed to be utilized as a secondary. I don't know if I'm using the right words, but like a secondary offense, where if they pulled you over for something else, you know, they couldn't pull you over for that. Basically,
in Pennsylvania, we still have voluntary seatbelt laws. They can only hit. They lie. The reality is, the only thing they can do is give you a ticket for the driver, and they can't stop you for a seatbelt. They have to stop you for something else.
Okay.
They lied. It started at
so
the
you're
end
saying
of the Bush
passengers aren't obligated to wear a seatbelt in Pennsylvania?
Nope. They started this at the end of the Bush administration. I remember the Texas Rangers came in.
No, I think it's a motor vehicle operator who is responsible.
It's terrible. It's terrible. And it still hasn't changed. You know, like I said, we still have.
Well, as long as you live in a nanny state, nanny society, none of this stuff is going to change, and that's where that guy's coming from. Ricky, thanks for the call tonight. He's coming from that state of fear, and oh my God, somebody's getting shot somewhere in the United States. Oh, there's a school that's been shot up, even though of course the school is a gun-free zone, and so therefore no one's allowed to have a gun to defend themselves, including the teachers or any other staff members who might be on that school campus, which is of course why those are the places that get targeted more often than anywhere else. Because even though the psychos who want to go and shoot someone to death are obviously crazy, that doesn't mean that they are stupid, right? Like, there may indeed be if schools were allowed to actually have guns on campus and people could defend themselves against psychopaths, you may still have some psycho that shows up and tries to shoot, but some of them are going to think twice about their what they're doing.
I feel like there's a little bit of a bigger issue here, because I don't necessarily know what percentage of these people are psychopaths and what percentage of these people have just been abused by the system to such a point where they feel that the only way to resolve the issue is if the world just ended, right? Because I don't know. Like, it just seems
I think you have to be a psychopath to be willing to take somebody's life. I mean, that's...
I get where you're coming from. I just think there is probably a little bit more nuance than that. But I think the better solution is to get rid of government schooling, not outlaw guns. Guns are, a lot of these problems end up as a result of forcing people to do things they don't want.
To be fair, there was a shooting at a Christian school recently.
I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that you're still, and that could still be a situation somebody was forced to do something they didn't want.
Oh,
right?
Of course, a lot of these private schools are still set up like government schools. They have the classroom, they have the grade levels.
They're still being forced to go to school either by parents or the state.
Yep. Yeah, I think it was Jay Noon who was just talking about last night how he learned to read because he wanted to know how to fix like a motorbike that he'd purchased, and he got the manual for the motorbike, but he didn't know how to read it. So like that gave him the incentive to actually get people to help him learn how to read the manual. And he ended up learning how to read it, and he fixed the motorbike up, and he had himself not only the ability to read, but the ability to fix a motorbike as well.
Yeah.
It's like that's an unschooling story,
It's interesting because there are some students. This is the thing. It's like where education is sort of a good thing. If you try and force it down people's throats, they don't end up learning because they don't want to learn what you're teaching them. You have to teach people what they want to learn, and then it might be useful to them at some point. Mm-hmm. But if you just try and force people into this rigid system that teaches everybody the same thing, it just doesn't work, and you end up creating problems. All sorts of problems. And the United States isn't is probably has gotten even worse over the decades, with removals of things like shop class. And I'm not saying they should be teaching shop class in schools. I don't think they necessarily should. But the point that I'm making is that if you have a system that it's everybody's geared, say, for college, when these kids, a lot of these kids are never going to go to college. It's just they don't have the
they shouldn't.
The abilities
most people shouldn't go to
attend college. And so if you force them in that direction and they never get the opportunity to go in a different direction, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to end up with school shootings. You're going to end up with things that, they probably shouldn't happen. And as you say, psychopaths, but I don't want to say I'm not, but the government or the people who support the state, they're pushing kids down that path.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. And I think your solution is the best possible solution is to end the idea of government schools. If you want to send your kid to some classroom environment where everybody's tiered off by grade level, then those will exist in the private education system. I think that's probably the worst possible plan if you've got a child that you care about. Like whether it's at a government school or a private school, obviously private schools are better at doing it, but still that whole kind of stratified tiered system, I don't think it's good. I don't think it's good for a young person's development. I like the idea of unschooling, where somebody can just teach, go learn the things they want to learn on their own time and at their own volition. We've seen that works really, really well. Some people that want to see more curriculum or more hand-holding, you can do homeschooling, where you decide what the curriculum is with your kids, that kind of thing. I think both of those systems have been proven to work really well. It's the homeschool kids; they always win the spelling bees.
What we need is a more diversified set of solutions. Is
yes,
what we need.
And you would get that from a free market in education.
Right.
If there weren't billions upon billions of dollars being funneled into this one-size-fits-all crap can government system, then you would have I think the expression is 1,000 flowers blooming. Right? There would be so many different types of schools. You could have the exact kind of education you want. Instead of fighting with other parents over, we need sex ed, we hate sex ed, we need the Bible, we hate the Bible, right? Like there's always been this struggle over what should be and shouldn't be the curriculum. They're fighting over books in the library right now, over what isn't an appropriate book to be in a library. How about this? How about the people that want to have books about sex in their school library? They have their own school. They get to decide what's in their school library. And then the conservative types that want to have the Bible and, their whatever conservative books that they want to have their kids read, they can have their own school. The atheists can have their own school, right? Like all of these things can be true if we were to just allow the market to work.
The humorous part about it is most parents wouldn't care either way. So
you don't think?
I don't think so. And I think at the end of the day, what you'd find is that you'd have, some schools that were conservative, sure, and didn't have that. But I don't necessarily think that. I suspect that most of the schools would still
just be secular. You think?
Yeah, I think it would be secular.
Might be right.
I mean, I'm not saying that there's not there's certainly there's more religious fervor, I guess, in certain parts of the country. And you probably see more Christian schools in certain parts of the country, or religious schools in general. But I suspect a lot of the cities, a lot of other parts, you would see more secular.
Well,
schooling.
that's what we want to see. We want to see different choices, different options. I mean, even in a city, you'd probably find religious schools.
Oh, for
right?
sure.
For sure.
There's lots of
churches.
There's a lot of private schools run by religious entities in the cities for probably tending to be a more wealthier clientele or customer. I don't know.
Sometimes
how you
they have
phrase that, but
scholarships for those places for poor people.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, they do.
And that's of course the answer. Inevitably the question comes up. Well, what about the poor? You libertarians, you just want to leave the poor behind. It's like, no, actually. There have been studies done, and I forget if it was like India. I think it was Dr. Mary Ruwart, who wrote the book Healing Our World. If I recall correctly, she cites one of these studies in her book where they looked at private school options and specifically looking at the question of, is this affordable? Can the poorest of the poor people in India, right, like people who are barely eking out a living in some cases, can they afford to go to a private school? And the answer was, well, if they couldn't afford it, there were literally hundreds or thousands of scholarships for schools available from some of the wealthier Indian people who wanted to make sure that the poorest people would still get an education. So yes, the answer was yes, they could afford it with some help, and that's okay.
You know what's interesting actually is if you start looking at college, okay, if you take this at the college level in the United States, what you'll notice is that the kids who get the grants, they're going to private or the, how do I say this? I probably need to rephrase this a little bit, but if you go to a private school, you're way more, even though it's a higher cost, you're way more likely to get grant money. Whereas if you go to a government school,
why is that?
You're less likely to get grant money.
But why?
I don't have an answer for you exactly, but I just know that's the case. So it's kind of like when you're looking at costs of private education at the college level, it's the price is higher, but in reality, by the time you get done paying for it, it's probably not, at least not, there's not the disparity that appears on paper.
Well, plus it's a terrible idea to look at colleges when we're talking about what schools could cost, right? Because colleges have seen prices go up over the years instead of going down. Like normally in a free market, we expect prices to go down, competition, service is going to go up.
But that's sort of actually a good reason to talk about it.
Well, we should talk about it and why colleges are not a good example to look at pricing, because they are guaranteed to get the funding they want to get by the federal government, who provides the majority of the loans, like the supermajority, the lion's share of college loans. So basically the colleges know, hey, we can increase the pay for all these teachers. We can increase we want to build some more buildings, like whatever the thing is that they want to do to increase the tuition that they're charging, they know they're going to get it. It's not like they're competing against the other colleges to bring prices down. There is no such competition. And plus, most of the colleges are state operations to begin with.
Yep.
So it's like, this is not a free market. College is not a free market or anything close to a free market. You can look at actual private schools today, and I was shocked to learn this, but there's actually a significant number of them that are cheaper than the government schools, like government high school. And the perfect example of this is Croydon, New Hampshire, where there was a school board meeting last year, and this has made a lot of news. It was actually the focus of two of the episodes of the NBC Boston documentary series about the Free State Project, where the Croydon School Board at the town meeting that they had townsfolk come in with one Free Stater who said, let's cut the budget by 50% and take it from roughly $20,000 per pupil to $10,000. And his justification was, look at the scores. The test scores over the last few decades are terrible. They haven't gotten better, but the funding has gone through the roof. He says, the proposal was to cut it to like 1990s funding levels, around $10,000.
It wasn't that the average? Like the average in New Hampshire or something like that?
No, that's I think below. I think that's below.
Below the average in terms of
I think it's probably like 15 or something in New Hampshire, somewhere in that range. But anyway, the thing that one of the points he made that was so persuasive, besides showing the chart of more money doesn't mean better results, he also showed what the private schools in the area charge, and $10,000 per pupil is still more than what the private schools, who are actually getting good results for their students, are charging. It's like the private schools were like $8,000 or $9,000. So he's like, the argument was, we're still proposing to spend more than what the private schools are spending. And they actually passed it at the town meeting, but then all of the statists took hold of it and they got pissed and they undid it. Sadly.
Do you know what's interesting is I did a little bit of math, and if you take into account inflation, this is a number that just shocked me when I did the math. 1960s, like if you took into account inflation, it would be about $2,000 per student, compared to about $20,000 in New Hampshire. In terms of how much it's gone up. So
hold on. So you're saying if you account for inflation,
yes,
in today's dollars, what they were spending in 1960 at a government school was the equivalent of $2,000 today's dollars?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and we have $20,000 going to per student at today's school. So we're talking about 20 times as much.
And I think most people would tell you that the government schools were better back then too. Than they were.
I don't know if they were better, but I can certainly tell you that it's absolutely insane the amount of money
that is insane.
We're being forced to pay for bad government schools.
Yep. Yeah, up here it's like 60 to 70% of the property tax bill.
Yeah.
I mean, if you could get rid of government schools, your property taxes at least would come down. If you're in New Hampshire, for instance, your property taxes would be a fraction. It'd be like
about half.
It'd be nothing.
It'd be about half what you're paying now.
Yeah, it'd be less than half. You'd look at it and be like, oh yeah, it's not so bad. But with the government schools in there, it's crazy. There's more coming up here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's not to say there isn't a ton of other government waste that can be dealt with. And that's, of course, some of the things that the Free State Project is trying to do here in New Hampshire. We'll continue here in moments. We'll get into the privacy issue and the latest federal attack on your privacy coming up.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. Physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com. The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Elon Musk has named a veteran media executive to replace him as CEO of Twitter. The billionaire who bought the company last year for $44 billion says Linda Yaccarino will start the job in around 6 weeks' time. FSN Silicon Valley correspondent Ira Spitzer has more.
Linda Yaccarino steps into the top job at Twitter after 12 years at NBC Universal, where she served as head of advertising. In a tweet announcing Yaccarino's appointment, Musk says she will focus primarily on business operations while he shifts to product design and new technology. The billionaire Tesla CEO has had a tumultuous tenure since purchasing the social media platform last October and taking it private. He's laid off almost 3/4 of the company's staff and overseen a chaotic rollout of a new paid subscription service.
Daniel Penny, the man accused of choking a homeless man to death on the New York subway, has been charged with second-degree manslaughter. The 24-year-old Marine veteran handed himself over to police on Friday morning. FSN's Jody Jacobs has more from court in New York.
In a short court appearance, Daniel Penny was charged and then released on $100,000 cash bail and ordered to turn over his passport. Penny is the man seen in a viral video choking Jordan Neely to death on board a train. Neely was a subway performer who was homeless. According to witnesses, he was begging for food and acting erratically. The performer's death sparked several protests here in New York City as people called on authorities to arrest Penny. If found guilty, the Marine veteran could face up to 15 years in prison. He will be back in court again on July 17. Jody Jacobs, New York.
An uneasy calm remains at the US southern border with Mexico after the pandemic-era policy Title 42, used to expel millions of asylum seekers, came to an end. The Biden administration has now set out sweeping new rules, opening up some alternative routes for immigrants while bringing in regulations meant to deter illegal crossings. FSN's Benji Hire reports from El Paso in Texas on the US-Mexico border.
There are approximately 60,000 people waiting to cross into the United States from Mexico, with the Department of Homeland Security warning of difficult days ahead. But the scene on the US side, at least for now, is one of calm, of order. Law enforcement personnel here insisting they have the tools they need to prepare for a potential influx. Nonetheless, El Paso remains in a state of emergency, as do many other cities along the border.
Pakistan's ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan has been granted bail for 2 weeks after being arrested earlier this week on corruption charges. His arrest has been called unlawful by the country's Supreme Court. From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking again today at Imran Khan, the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, who was arrested earlier this week on corruption charges, only to see the country's Supreme Court rule on Thursday that his detention was illegal. It's the latest twist and turn in an ongoing battle between Mr. Khan, ousted from power a year ago, and the current government. At stake, the timetable for the country's elections and the independence of the Pakistani judiciary.
The Supreme Court is actually, there is quite a bit of respect for the Supreme Court, but what's been happening lately is that this current government has curtailed the powers of the Supreme Court.
Mahtab Aziz is a UK lawyer who has represented Imran Khan in the past and says he's worried about the days ahead in Pakistan.
If you recall, there was an attempted assassination previously, and it has always been assumed that there will be multiple attempts at assassinating. That was just the first one. And then they tried to do it again previously in March when he was attending, like the situation now, when he attended court, they tried to assassinate him, but he managed to somehow escape. I really, truly fear for his life.
For now, the former Prime Minister is being forced to remain in a government guest house, even though the Supreme Court ruled that he should be freed immediately. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
And the main news again, Elon Musk has named a veteran media executive, Linda Yaccarino, to replace him as CEO of Twitter. Daniel Penny, the man accused of choking a homeless man to death on the New York subway, has been charged with second-degree manslaughter. And an uneasy calm remains at the US southern border with Mexico after the pandemic-era policy, Title 42, came to an end. There's more from us on Twitter at Feature Story. That's Feature Story News. Nick Harper reporting.
Facing mounting criticism that lethal injection is cruel and outdated, Ohio has replaced it with a system that quickly and humanely rips off the heads of death row inmates using powerful robotic arms. The new device is designed to be as humane as possible, emitting soothing white noise and putting prisoners on a cushioned seat before its metallic talons dig into their necks and painlessly wrench their heads off. Ohio Department of Corrections Director Gary Moore praised the machine, saying, quote, "Our new system is a hallmark of compassion. Now these deaths will be pain-free because the machine's claws are coated with topical anesthetic." Quickly pulling off a prisoner's head is considered less cruel than lethal injection, which requires 3 separate chemicals. And Ohio isn't the only state changing the way it handles capital punishment. Last month, Texas unveiled the Machinator, which humanely squishes up to 50 prisoners at once. Coming up next, is anything valuable buried in the woods behind my house? Our team of investigators finds out.
This is the Onion News Network.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. We're kicking off the second hour of the show. The phones are open. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. You can join us online. Just head over to freetalklive.com and enjoy the features that we have there for you. Once again, that is freetalklive.com. One of those features is our social media platform, which is a Mastodon-based system. I'm very happy to announce that our programming IT guru, Bob, has set up the new version of Mastodon as of today. It's been in the works for some time, but we finally got it going. He had to do a lot of upgrades.
It wasn't that long, I don't think. It was actually relatively quick, I feel like, given that there had to be like OS upgrades and things.
Well, it didn't take him long once he got started on it. Well, we'll just say that.
Well, I mean, 6 hours is still quite a bit of time for a busy guy who's got other projects.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. People have been asking, though, for months for this upgrade, so I'm glad that it's finally done.
I didn't think it was a month old. I thought it was maybe
the end of January.
Really?
So it's been a few months.
Interesting.
But you know, it's there now.
It's longer than I thought then.
We're up to version 4 point something. I think it's 4.1.2 or 4.12, something like that. Anyway, you can check it out over at social.freetalklive.com. Everything went smoothly. Yeah, it's 4.1.2. So the latest version of Mastodon, which is what? What is Mastodon, Chris?
Mastodon is what they call a federated. So it's sort of like a decentralized, something that's decentralized. So there's many different operators with many different servers, and each server has their own policies.
Some of them are terrible.
Some of them are terrible. Yeah. But what this means is effectively you can't be censored, at least not across the entire platform.
Correct.
You can be, if you are on something like, if you're on Twitter, they can just ban you from Twitter, and then all of a sudden your voice goes absolutely nowhere. If a server bans you from Mastodon, your voice still goes to other servers.
By the way, perfect example of what you're talking about, our very own co-host, Nobody, who's absent this week. His mom had a stroke last week. Apparently she's doing better. So surprisingly, she's in her 90s, and she's managed to actually, she's on the mend apparently after a stroke, so that's good news. But he's still out in Michigan, so that's why he's not with us. But he did talk to me today to let me know he's been banned from Twitter again. And so he was interested in getting back on Mastodon. I'm like, well, yeah, okay.
Why do you get off of Mastodon?
I don't know.
You know, it's interesting. Like, I've been using Mastodon, and look, I wasn't the first person to hop on Mastodon. You think I would be, given I have a computer company and I'm in the tech sphere, but and that's just it. But I did get on Mastodon. I don't know, what was it, a couple years ago, and I started.
Several years.
Been like 5. Probably 5 to 6 years ago. I guess it's longer than I thought. I think
we started promoting it, but in 2018 or around thereabouts, I think, at your suggestion when the Liberdon server.
I was
came online.
already on Mastodon at that point.
I think you were.
Yeah. So but people are following me. I've got I don't know how many followers I've got, but I got there's a lot of people following me. I make up posts regularly. I know Free Talk Live has an account. You post regularly. So yeah, and there's actually was already an established user base for Mastodon long before I ever even got on. So
yeah, and of course it got really a nice boost when Elon Musk took over Twitter in November of last year. There was a kind of a exodus of, let's say, leftists that were upset at Musk's new management style over Twitter. And they left Twitter and they joined up a bunch of lefty-leaning Mastodon servers out there. So there was a big push then. And I think you're going to see another one now, because now some of the right-wing people are upset about what's going on with Elon Musk, who has now stepped down as the CEO of Twitter, and he has appointed a woman who was a pro-vaccination, pro-mask World Economic Forum member. Like, she's a total tool, this lady, apparently, of the establishment, right? And this is the woman that Elon Musk has adopted as the new CEO of Twitter. So there's another big, lots of people, how dare you, Elon Musk? There's going to be a lot of caterwauling, a lot of screaming and yelling online, a lot of reeing over this. But the question is, are you willing to do something about it? Some people have canceled their check marks. So I don't know if you're aware, but in recent months, Elon Musk had put on this blue check mark feature on Twitter where he was charging $8 a month. And there was a lot of controversy about that, because it used to be you had to be a Hollywood star or a politician or something to get the check mark. And so the Hollywood stars and the politicians were upset because now Musk was letting anybody get a check mark for $8 a month, which I thought was pretty entertaining.
Yeah,
that was pretty fun. And I did actually throw him $8 a month for a few months there, just because I thought he had taken things in a good direction. But at the same time, I actually canceled that before this recent controversy.
Sure.
Just because I, still have my critiques of the site. They still weren't as free speech as Musk would like to represent that he is. Musk claims he's a free speech absolutist, but yet he won't allow Alex Jones on the site.
For sure, yeah.
Right. He's banned Nobody now from our co-host from the site. And so the bans keep happening. There's clearly no free speech there. And it would be one thing if the $8 a month actually got rid of the advertisements, but it doesn't. It's like, why are you? What's the deal you're getting exactly for $8 a month if you still have to look at all the stupid ads on the site? So anyway, I canceled that a little while back, and now a lot of people are saying they're canceling the $8 a month to express their displeasure with this woman being hired as the CEO. But that's not far enough, is it, Chris, to just cancel?
No, I mean, the danger is when everybody's on this same centralized platform, you end up with a system that nobody's happy with.
Right, and all it takes is one staff change to piss off a bunch of users.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. This wouldn't be the first time we've seen the right actually look at and even begin to move away from Twitter.
Yeah, sure. Gab got a bunch of their users a long time ago.
Right, exactly.
And then moved to Mastodon.
Gab actually, is Mastodon. So, you got people.
Even Trump is using Mastodon on his site.
You got both people on the right and the left who are moving to Mastodon. And you got the libertarians too. I mean, it's like you got everybody slowly moving to Mastodon. Just as people have been slowly moving away from Facebook over the years, they're slowly moving away from Twitter.
Yeah, and so now's a good time to start thinking about this again. We've got our own server. If you want to join it, you can. It's over at social.freetalklive.com. Like we said, thanks to Bob for doing the upgrade here today. It's working great. Everything's lickety-split, fast, looking good. So hope you enjoyed the new version there. But if you don't want to join our server, there's another one over at liberdon.com. They were first. They deserve credit for being the first libertarian, true libertarian server run by actual liberty-minded people. And they're still out there too. So, take your pick. One or the other. They're both free. They're both going to allow you to express yourself. You don't have to be a libertarian to be on social.freetalklive.com. I don't care what your political persuasion is, honestly. But there are a couple of ground rules that we have. We don't have a lot of rules. But we do have a couple of ground rules. One of them is no snitching. And what I mean on that is don't be reporting people for their opinions on our server. Okay, and thankfully no one on our server has done that with the exception of one guy who showed up during the Twitter exodus in November, right? So there was like a lot of people leaving Twitter, as I was telling you, kind of left-leaning people. And so you can go to server listings for Mastodon. There's thousands of Mastodon servers. So somehow this guy found our server, and he wasn't a Free Talk Live listener. You could tell because we have a sign-up. Whenever you sign up for the server, it asks you a question about, like, why are you here? Kind of thing. And that's the way we keep out spammers. And his answer, you could tell it was written by an actual person, but you could also tell he didn't have any idea what the server was. It's like, okay, well, he seems like a real person, so I approved him, right?
Sure.
And within 24 hours, he started reporting people's posts. And I said, okay, this guy does not understand where he is. He did not read the very little documentation that we have. Like, we don't have some crazy length privacy policy or server policy.
Terms of service.
It's very short, very short, easy to read. Anyone can read it. He obviously didn't, and so I blew him out the door. I was like, "You're in the wrong server, dude. You go find a server that's better for you, because I don't care about what you think about what other people are posting.
Yep.
I don't care about your opinion about what other people are posting. If you don't like it, just use the block feature. You can do that. The system has a way to deal with people you don't want to see. And so we actually say that in the server terms. It's like, okay, you see something you don't like, just block that person. Okay, problem solved. Because we're not going to do anything about it. But yet we still get reports. One of the problems with Mastodon, it ain't perfect, but it's worth using. I think it's pretty good overall.
Yeah,
but
nothing's perfect, unfortunately.
Yeah, one of the problems is it is programmed by commies and socialists in Europe, from what I understand. So, like, some of the moderating tools aren't that great. And one of them that I really particularly don't like is that any jackball on any other server can report posts on our server because they don't like them. So if one of our users on our server is posting to our server about something that somebody on another server, because it's federated, so they're still connected, they can still read what's going on, and our users can go on that server's users posts and post comments. So they might be doing that and saying things that are upsetting. And so somebody from that other server reports our server users post, and we have to see the report. And I just don't care. I don't care what the report is. I'm not going to shut this guy down because he's not libertarian, or shut him down because he's got an offensive opinion. But that's what they want me to do. It's kind of entertaining to see what people do complain about. Thankfully, it doesn't happen that often because we don't have that big of a server. But
yeah, what's interesting too is there's actually servers out there that are run by people, on the left, and they will absolutely block whole Mastodon servers.
They've blocked ours.
Yeah. So, but that's okay.
That's fine. Yeah.
It's okay. You don't have to sign up for.
They blocked ours for reasons of free speech.
Right.
Seriously.
Right. There's going to be people out there who don't like free speech that run their own Mastodon instance because they don't think Twitter's being harsh enough on blocking people.
This is why you need to be choosy about which server. You don't just pick off a list. You should do a little research. What do they believe? What is the reason this server exists?
Are these principled freedom folk, or are these people who, they hate freedom, and that's why they have their own server?
So check it out over at social.freetalklive.com. Maybe you're going to continue on Twitter. That's fine. What I would recommend that you do is get on Mastodon and then cross-post. Promote your Mastodon on Twitter. They may not like that because there was a time when Musk was like targeting anyone who was posting links to any sites that weren't his own site or like official news sites out there. And in fact, they will. Musk made an open source of their algorithms or whatever. He open sourced the Twitter algorithms, and so people dug into that and they found out that you actually get deboosted. So like you get points taken away from your posts silently if you link to other sites that are not news websites from Twitter. Yeah. So, but that said, you can still post them. They're not banning Mastodon posts quite yet.
Well, it's kind of interesting because
that way you can let your viewers know that you're over this other place.
It's kind of interesting, that you say that, because it's more evidence of sort of manipulation. And I mean, I've already know it's happening, but it's it's just more evidence of that manipulation of the population. Yeah, it's confirmation of the manipulation. It's just yet another example of it happening, and it's so blatantly out there. It's not like they're hiding it, especially when they're publishing the source code. Yeah,
and I mean, he deserves some kudos for that, for revealing the secrets, so to speak. So good for them. But Mastodon doesn't have that, at least unless it's been modified, right? Yeah. When you follow people on Mastodon, you see their posts. You can look at the local server and see all of the posts that are on your own server, the one that you joined, and you can also look at the whole planet of Mastodon posts, at least from the servers that haven't broken up with your server. And and as you mentioned, there are some servers out there. And I was doing a search one day for our server's name or whatever, and I found a bunch of these socialist servers that had totally banned social.freetalklive.com.
It's actually funny. I think there's a blacklist that they share amongst each other to block.
Seemed like it.
Yeah, block non-left-wing servers. Yeah.
Whatever.
It's okay. This is why we can each run our own. Everybody can run their own server. And it's not like every user has to run their own server, but
it's apparently complex, so it's probably not within the realm of the average user. Yeah. You do have to be like an IT guy.
There are still, I think it's around 5,000 servers.
Is that all? I thought it was more than that.
I don't think so, but that's still a lot of servers.
That is a lot of servers.
I mean, compared to one Twitter server, right? Technically there's more servers behind the scenes, but it's like
that one centrally controlled. If Elon Musk says he wants you gone, you're gone.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you have 5,000 choices to pick from, as opposed to if you're on Twitter, well, no choices.
You're going to find a home in the Mastodon universe, or Fediverse, as they call it. Let's go to the phones here. We got Gigi on the line in South Carolina. Gigi, you're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead.
Good evening, everybody.
Hi there.
Thank God it's Friday. I have a question for all of our listeners out there in these good old US of A states. My husband and I were just talking about the horrible event that took place on the subway with the mentally ill gentleman that was essentially suffocated to death, murdered, just like George Floyd was. So here's our question, and I say this.
Wait a minute. Hold on a second. Before you go on, Gigi, I have to admit, I didn't follow this story closely.
Okay.
But my understanding of this story is that it was not like George Floyd, because George Floyd was killed by uniformed police officers.
Yes, you are correct. The man who was accused of putting the black man who was mentally ill in a chokehold was not in a uniform. Correct.
I believe that the man
But he was a law enforcement officer.
I believe he was ex-military, right? Or current military?
Ex-military and ex-Marine.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so he had the training on how to take somebody down. But
absolutely, yes.
But let's also be clear about something else, Gigi. Wasn't this guy a dangerous person? This not the Marine, but the crazy man. I mean, wasn't he a threat to the people around him?
Well, this is a good point that you are bringing up, sir, because here is the circumstance in terms of an argument in defense of the ex-Marine. Did he truly feel that his personal safety, his life, and possibly other passengers on this subway train was in fact in direct jeopardy, as opposed to an argument on the other side of the coin in defense of the situation and the environment on the subway train? Was this gentleman just rambling and ranting, I'm hungry, I haven't eaten, somebody help me, I need food? Why didn't other passengers, instead of just yelling at the ex-Marine, get off of him, stop what you're doing, why didn't they pass around a hat, so to speak, collect some money and give it to him, or simply tell this man, at the next stop we'll get off and buy you a sandwich? Or another option would have been, if they're yelling at this ex-Marine, stop it, get off of him, why didn't they subdue the ex-Marine?
Well, what I see here in this video, and again, I don't know what the full length of the video is. I don't know where it starts. Okay, I have not found that. That's probably out there somewhere, but it didn't come up in a quick search. But the video that I do see actually shows other passengers assisting the man in taking this guy down.
So my husband asked an interesting question from a legal perspective. My husband is a practicing attorney here in South Carolina. Are the other passengers negligent, culpable, accessories, whatever adjective legally you would like to assign? Why was only this one individual arrested and charged? Good point that you just brought up, sir.
Yeah. I don't know if people are out there following this story and they know a little bit more about this. I mean, given the fact that there are other passengers here assisting, assisting the man who is choking out the crazy person, who's apparently, his name was Jordan Neely. That was the I don't know if you want to call him a victim, but the guy who died apparently after this. What is not clear is what transpired before the video picks up.
It seems like it's important to know what the guy did. The crazy guy did.
Marine. That's my question. What was his motivation to chokehold this mentally ill person? And if the other passengers were assisting, as I am inclined to agree with you, why weren't they arrested and charged?
Well, they may yet be. They apparently just recently charged the man who choked him out.
Right. It took the district attorney in Manhattan quite a while to make a charge and an arrest. My other question is...
Daniel Penny is his name, the
correct.
ex-Marine.
Over a year ago, I remember calling in one evening. The war in Ukraine had just begun, and several of you hosts were saying, look now what we're getting ourselves into. And I called in and I said, mark my word, gentlemen, this ain't going to be over in 6 weeks. It's going to go on and on because the more companies and businesses that get defense contracts, people make money when war goes on.
Well, yeah, they needed to have something since they as soon as they pulled the troops out of Afghanistan, you knew something new was coming up.
That's right. They needed something new to put people to work and give businesses paychecks and defense contracts. You hit it on the button. Yeah. It was simply a new geographic direction.
We'll see if we can find out more about this particular story, why indeed. My guess is the crazy man attacked him. I mean, usually there's...
I don't know. I am of the same ilk that you are. I haven't seen it from the beginning. And don't forget, if people just put their cell phone videos on, does it necessarily mean it was from start to end or in the middle of some type of altercation, verbally, physically, or perhaps both?
It seems like it's critical to, before you can even evaluate whether or not it was any kind of self-defense or whether the guy was the military officer was justified in doing anything.
Well,
was there some sort of violence committed by the crazy guy?
Self-defense, because this man was a direct threat and out of control, and you can never second guess what somebody will do in their behavior physically when they are out of control. So did this ex-military man have legal justification to act?
Thank you, Gigi. We're going to see if we can learn more about this. And if you've been out there paying closer attention, it's like I said, I'm aware of this case, but I have not yet. I'm trying to find the video right now, like one that's not chopped up by the news companies to fit whatever the news narrative is. Thank you, Gigi. There's more coming up here. You can join the show, 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live.
Email is easy, instant, and free, and that can be real embarrassing. Email lacks the eye contact and body language you get in face-to-face conversation, or the tone of voice and other nuance you hear in a telephone conversation. Email is just words, often few words. We're all smothering in spam, so we often reply in terse fashion that's easy to misunderstand. And email doesn't cost you a postage stamp, and it lacks the deliberation time it'd take to walk to the snail mail box. So it's easy to succumb to the "oh yeah" stimulus response trap. When in doubt, don't snap back at snippy messages you get. You may have mistaken the sender's intent. And unless you're sending AOL to AOL, there's no unsend. For more tips on critical communication skills for the way things are now, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Elon Musk has named a veteran media executive to replace him as CEO of Twitter. The billionaire who bought the company last year for $44 billion says Linda Yaccarino will start the job in around 6 weeks' time. FSN Silicon Valley correspondent Ira Spitzer has more.
Linda Yaccarino steps into the top job at Twitter after 12 years at NBC Universal, where she served as head of advertising. In a tweet announcing Yaccarino's appointment, Musk says she will focus primarily on business operations while he shifts to product design and new technology. The billionaire Tesla CEO has had a tumultuous tenure since purchasing the social media platform last October and taking it private. He's laid off almost 3/4 of the company's staff and overseen a chaotic rollout of a new paid subscription service.
Daniel Penny, the man accused of choking a homeless man to death on the New York subway, has been charged with second-degree manslaughter. The 24-year-old Marine veteran handed himself over to police on Friday morning. FSN's Jody Jacobs has more from court in New York.
In a short court appearance, Daniel Penny was charged and then released on $100,000 cash bail and ordered to turn over his passport. Penny is the man seen in a viral video choking Jordan Neely to death on board a train. Neely was a subway performer who was homeless. According to witnesses, he was begging for food and acting erratically. The performer's death sparked several protests here in New York City as people called on authorities to arrest Penny. If found guilty, the Marine veteran could face up to 15 years in prison. He will be back in court again on July 17. Jody Jacobs, New York.
An uneasy calm remains at the US southern border with Mexico after the pandemic-era policy Title 42, used to expel millions of asylum seekers, came to an end. The Biden administration has now set out sweeping new rules, opening up some alternative routes for immigrants while bringing in regulations meant to deter illegal crossings. FSN's Benji Hire reports from El Paso in Texas on the US-Mexico border.
There are approximately 60,000 people waiting to cross into the United States from Mexico, with the Department of Homeland Security warning of difficult days ahead. But the scene on the US side, at least for now, is one of calm, of order. Law enforcement personnel here insisting they have the tools they need to prepare for a potential influx. Nonetheless, El Paso remains in a state of emergency, as do many other cities along the border.
Pakistan's ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan has been granted bail for 2 weeks after being arrested earlier this week on corruption charges. His arrest has been called unlawful by the country's Supreme Court. From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live. You can join us here. You can bring up anything you want. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Joining you here tonight in the studio, it's Ian.
And Chris.
And Chris, you can join him on his show, which is Freedom Decrypted. And find him over at freedomdecrypted.com. It's a once-a-week tech show with a pro-liberty viewpoint. And he does it live on Saturdays at about 5 o'clock Eastern Time. If you can't listen live, well, you can always listen later on via podcast, audio only, or you can watch his video archives at freedomdecrypted.com. So be sure you check that out. There's this question on the table that if anybody wants to weigh in on, I'd be happy to hear your opinion about it, because honestly, I don't have enough information to make a real decision here about what happened on the subway. There's a subway train in New York City where a man was killed by a ex-Marine, apparently, who choked the life out of him. Now, what was going on prior to the chokehold is what is not clear. The video footage that is available that I've found so far does not have the full confrontation. It just shows the actual chokehold. In the not even being applied, but as it was already applied. So it was the video that I'm seeing here picks up in the midst of the chokehold. We don't even get to see the beginning of it or what led up to it. Maybe there is video of that, but it's one of those problems where because of these centralized services in a lot of cases, like if you ever search YouTube for video, you always find the ABC News, the CNN, the official big media corporation versions of that video, which of course are heavily edited. We don't actually get to see, or at least it's not easy to find, the original guy or lady who recorded the video and put it online. That doesn't come up first. Even though it's the most relevant result, that's what I want to see. That's not what comes up. I actually searched Odyssey for it as well. I couldn't find it there. Apparently, the guy who originally, when you look at the news reports of this event, you can see there's a name, Juan Alberto Vasquez, over top of one of the videos.
Cited the source.
So they did cite the source.
Okay,
and so
good.
I looked him up, and I found an article from Curbed. It's apparently New York Magazine. And strangely, this doesn't have the video on this article about the man who took the video, but it does say that he uploaded it to his Facebook page. So that may be why I can't easily find it, because I'm not on Facebook. So that could be the reason. But anyway, they ask him a series of questions about what happened on this particular day. He was riding on a train from Brooklyn to Yonkers, and he said he had some interviews to do at Broadway and Lafayette, where everything took place, is where I was going to switch trains and get to a different train on the 6th to go to Grand Central. He said, something really curious happened. He said, I've made that transfer various times, and I know the stairs are on one end of the platform, but I got confused about whether I should be at the front or the back of the train to be closest. So on this occasion, working off the idea that I should be at the front, I moved train cars at every stop to make my way there, but it turns out I was wrong. The stairs are closest at the back. If I'd gotten it right, I would have been at the back of the train and I wouldn't have seen anything. He says, we stopped at 2nd Avenue and I saw someone running toward the doors. The door was just about to close, 5 inches away from closing. Then Jordan stuck his hand between them. Now, which one was Jordan? I don't remember the names of these people here. Looks like, okay, the Marine was Daniel Penny. Jordan Neely was the victim, or the man who died in this case. So Jordan stuck his hand between the doors. He says, the irony that I'd mistakenly swapped cars, and the irony that if he'd gotten there a single second later, the door would have closed and he wouldn't have gotten in. But he stopped the door from closing and he got on the train, and he stood in the middle of the train car, and then he started yelling that he didn't have food and that he didn't have water. From what I understood, he was yelling that he was tired and that he didn't care about going to jail. He says, I tried to start filming from that moment, but I didn't because I couldn't see anything. It was too crowded. And then I heard him take off his jacket. He bundled it up and just threw it on the floor very violently. You could hear the sound of the zipper hitting the floor. At that moment, when he threw the jacket, the people who were sitting around him stood up and moved away. He kept standing there and kept yelling. It's at that moment that this man came up behind him and grabbed him by the neck. And I think, I didn't see, but I think that move of grabbing him by the neck also led him to grab Neely by the legs with his own. They both fell. And then in like 30 seconds, I don't know, we got to Broadway Lafayette, and they were just there on the floor. You ask how many people out of 100 would have dared to do something like that, and I think 98 would say, quote, no, I would wait to see one more sign that indicates aggression.
Yeah, that's not good.
When the two doors opened, everyone rushed out, obviously afraid because now there was an actual fight. I got out and was watching them on the floor with this other man helping hold Neely down. And there's just this confusion over what to do. All these people standing around on the platform and some of them yelling, call the police, call the police. There were a couple of people who approached the blonde guy. They say he's a Marine and asked him what's going on, and he told them to call the police. Obviously, the conductor had no idea what was going on. He was just going to close the doors and keep going. But there were people who stood between the doors and said, no, don't close the doors. I went over to the conductor, too, and he was saying over the speaker, police, police, but there weren't any police in the station. So I went back to where the scene was, and that's when I started to film. So apparently he did not get the interaction between these people. The allegation, though, is that the ex-Marine came up from behind the man, and that's how he put him in the chokehold. But it sounds like he might have jumped the gun, at least according to this one witness who said he saw the whole thing go down. So with that in mind, doesn't look good for this Marine in this particular case because, you know, if a crazy man's on the subway, he's free to be crazy as long as he doesn't attack somebody. And they're saying, this guy's saying he didn't attack anybody.
Yeah, it's keep your hands off other people. They might not be saying something you might think that they're just crazy, and they might be, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're violent. And assuming that somebody is going to be violent just because they're crazy, well, most of these people are not violent crazy; they're just crazy. So yeah,
let's go to the phones here. Caller, you're on Free Talk Live. What's your name?
Jet Stir.
Jet, you're on the air.
Yeah, I got something to say really important about this subject, and that is the choke he applied is called a rear naked choke. I don't know if anybody's talked about that before.
No.
But you kind of climb on a person like a backpack and wrap your arm around their neck and things. It should only be, I mean, to choke somebody out, it only takes less than 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as that person goes limp, you immediately release because you've cut off the blood to the brain.
Right.
And now I'm saying this because I have over 12 years of martial arts. I've been in two branches of the military. And so I know what I'm talking about. I've been choked out before. I've choked out other people before.
Mm-hmm.
But this is something that people really have to keep in mind. That rear naked choke, I mean, it was supposedly that he held it for 3 minutes.
Wow.
Something crazy like that. Yeah, that's what was reported. And I'm going, man, that takes less than 30 seconds before the guy is out. He's going to be out for a little bit.
So you're saying had he released the chokehold after 30 seconds, there's a good chance that the man would have survived?
Oh, yeah. What you do is as soon as any part of him goes limp, you know, you can tell he's out. And you got to let it go, because otherwise it's brain damage. I mean,
it sounds like this is a good case for manslaughter as opposed to murder. But I don't know. What's your thought?
I think they've charged him with manslaughter.
Oh, he did. Okay, they did.
I could be wrong about that, but I thought I saw that today.
Yeah, I hate it for the guy, but if you know how to do that rear naked choke, you also know how devastating it is and what it does.
Yeah, second-degree manslaughter is the charge in this particular case. So, thanks for the update on that, Jet. I definitely appreciate it. Let's continue here with Sheriff David Hathaway calling us from down in Arizona. He is in Santa Cruz County, one of the few actually principled guys out there in a position of law enforcement. David, welcome to the show. What's on your mind tonight?
Yeah, good evening, Ian and Chris. I'm mainly calling to try to improve my audio quality. Just because I do call kind of semi-regularly, but
it sounds great. I forgot to mention you are calling us on the SIP line here, so listeners that want to use the same level of quality can go to sip.freetalklive.com. That's sip.freetalklive.com and get step-by-step instructions on how to get on this particular line. It's kind of reserved for the people that are willing to jump through those hoops. So. Yeah, you sound great. But while you're here, let's talk about the issues, David, because there's a lot of fear-mongering in the news right now about this Title 42 going away, and you explained it to us the last time you were on the line. And let me recap it here, and you can tell me if I get anything wrong. So my understanding was this Title 42 was a temporary COVID provision where they were able to basically just turn people away from the United States at the border just ship them back over and say, due to COVID, you're out. And that's going to go away now. And it's
not gone yet?
I guess it was, was it yesterday, David, that was supposed to go away?
Yeah, at midnight last night. And, I'm doing interviews on this every day. I sent you one on an email, Ian, of one I did with NPR on the subject, and I compared it to the Y2K fiasco, the world's going to come to an end at this time, at this date, at midnight. And it's just so hilarious. CBP is trying to manufacture they're trying to make it into a self-fulfilling prophecy. So what they did is got a bunch of razor wire and containers and double stacked them across more than half of the vehicle lanes on the incoming lanes coming into the U.S. so they could create a really long line and create the optics to look like there is a problem. But, at the same time, they're going to start accepting applications from a lot of categories of people that they would not accept applications. But as we discussed before, this is not anything other than going back to the Title VIII United States Code, which was always there. It's the title we've had for decades.
This was the title under which various different administrations, children have been separated from families, thrown into camps, all the horror stories that we've heard about under Trump, under Biden, under Obama, etc. That's what Title VIII was leading to.
Yeah,
right?
and the Democrats are no better on this than the Republicans. I'm disappointed. The Democrat mayor, who's Hispanic, in my town, Spanish is his first language. He declared an emergency in our town, and you know why? You know what's coming next, Ian. It's so that he can qualify for the FEMA money to build shelters and build all the public assistance that's not being demanded by these people. First of all, there is no onslaught. There's nothing different than usual.
Wait a minute. Hold on, David. I've seen pictures on social media showing a huge waves of Hispanics south of the border just waiting to come into the United States. Are you saying that that's all ginned up fear?
Well, if they weren't accepting any applications at all under Title 42, of course, you're going to have some people that we're holding off that will come file the applications. But there's this little thing where the Biden administration a few days ago made a rule that said if you don't go through either their app or one of the officially recognized ports of entry where you can make your asylum claim, that you will be ineligible to ever make an asylum claim. So, but then they put you into this virtual queue, this endless list to get a hearing. And they have all these kind of goofy rules, like if you're claiming asylum, you have to first make the asylum claim in the first country that you entered after making an asylum claim. And since Mexico is ineligible for most claims of asylum, most of them are related to places like Nicaragua, Venezuela, and most people that come to the southwest border are from Mexico. But those that aren't from Mexico, they can say you should have made an asylum claim in Mexico first or Guatemala, so you're ineligible to make the claim here. So a lot of fine print that prevents people from making
a lot of
bureaucracy
claims that's going to get in the way of people who are trying to escape potentially political persecution in their home countries. This is just absolutely tragic.
Do you mind if I jump on to just another subject? I heard you guys talking about, when the government gins up a new crisis to replace the old one, like they gin up the Ukraine-Russia thing to replace COVID. Like another one that I'm familiar with, I used to work in DEA as a special agent in DEA. A lot of people don't know that Nixon campaigned on ending the Vietnam War, but once he was elected, all of a sudden those campaign promises didn't mean anything, and him and Harry Kissinger kept trying to prosecute the Vietnam War. And then the Paris Peace Accords came along, and the agreement was that the Vietnam War would end. But of course, Nixon and Kissinger did not want to end it. So what happened is Congress took away the funding. They had a super majority on a thing that was called the Case Church Amendment that said no more money could be spent in Southeast Asia, in Laos, in Cambodia, or in Vietnam to prosecute the Vietnam War. So Nixon was really upset about this. He had a law on his desk that was veto-proof because it was passed with a in excess of a 2/3 majority of Congress. So he had to sign it. But you know what happened on that exact same day that he signed the bill that ended the Vietnam War, which was July 1st, 1973. On that same day, he wrote an executive order to create the DEA on July 1st, 1973. No consultation with Congress, and all that equipment, those Hueys with door-mounted machine guns, they all went to South America and to Southeast Asia, but under a new war, under the war on drugs that he created on the same day that he ended the Vietnam War. So
the DEA was created by executive order. It wasn't an act of Congress?
No, it was executive order on July 1st, 1973, the same day that Nixon was forced to sign this veto-proof legislation ending the Vietnam War. So they seamlessly went into a new war, the war on drugs, that had this kind of a nebulous enemy.
Right.
And a lot of that equipment stayed in Vietnam. The CIA stayed involved. It was the same, foreigners that were being supported by the U.S. And in South America, I did that. I was in South America under a thing called Operation Snowcap, where we had those same Huey helicopters from Vietnam with the door-mounted machine guns, the same, U.S. intelligence operatives supporting the foreign military and the foreign police. So it's like the war continued and it looked exactly the same. I could show you my home movies of these Hueys with the door-mounted machine guns flying over the jungles and the muddy rivers and the banana trees and palm trees, but it was now the war on drugs rebranded. It was Vietnam War rebranded.
Right. That's crazy. I did not know that history of the DEA. I'm curious. You've mentioned that you were in the DEA previously, David. You're now obviously a very libertarian-minded guy. When did that change for you? At what point in your career did you realize something was wrong with what you were doing? If it was during your career.
You could see the whole failure of the war on drugs, and it doesn't make any sense, and it's a waste of money, and it's causing death and destruction and misery, and so many people, incarcerated in the U.S. for no reason, for victimless crimes. I just saw the hypocrisy of all that, and then kind of the whole Ron Paul revolution, both of his campaigns. I started reading those things and the Austrian economics and how really, like Murray Rothbard says, the government is a gang of thieves. It's not legitimate. There's no market signals to anything the government does. It's just funded on theft and things like even the sheriff's office I work for. That's not a market creation. That's funded through coercive taxation. So even things that a sheriff does is illegitimate. It's not something that there was, people voted with their dollars and decided we wanted the services that a sheriff's office provides. So, it was kind of that realization that kind of instinctively, I think the way my dad raised me, kind of had that libertarian instinct, and then kind of, seeing what Ron Paul wrote and the type of things that he read and he talked about.
Was the DEA your first law enforcement gig, or were you like just a cop before that, or like what came before?
Well, I went to the University of Arizona and I went to law school, and I was kind of wanting to go on my dad's footsteps. He was an attorney, and then he was a judge, and he was an appellate court judge. Just kind of looked up to my dad. And then a DEA agent actually approached me and said,
while you were in school?
Yeah, well, It was actually right when I got out of school. I was working at a McDonald's as an assistant manager, and then he said, "Hey, you're wasting your degree. You should come work for us." And I didn't even know what they did, but and I never strived to be a cop, but it was, I just got married, and I was thinking, well, I need the money, and these guys are paying a lot more than I can get elsewhere. So that was kind of the inducement.
Yeah. How long did it take you to really start questioning, what you were doing?
Well, especially in the South America part, when I saw, that they would go, blow up, structures and villages and airstrips and whatnot, and think, all the destruction and all the cost. And I was surprised it wasn't showing up on the evening news. It wasn't like the Vietnam War, where you see, the guys with their green, BDUs and their fatigues and going around with, I had an M16 with a grenade launcher on it, and think this is an all-out war. But it wasn't getting reported as such in the U.S. So, it's like just kind of realizing the nature of what was really going on versus what the American public thought about it, just kind of, and then the whole economics of the thing, realizing that, drugs being illegal does not benefit anybody. When anything's illegal, there's a black market that develops. There's no purity testing. People don't live on their reputations. You have unbranded, unmarked things that there's no way to review the producer or the vendor to see, are they honorable? Are you getting poison? When you allow a market to come out in the open, then people live and thrive on their reputations. So that's why you should make everything legal. And if it's a vendor is not going to want to sell something that's going to expose them to liability.
Did you hear the story? I think it must have been last year. It was about this DEA agent who was about to go to prison. And he came out with this whole expose on what he claimed was the truth about what was really going on in the DEA. There was like all these, alcohol and drug-fueled parties that was going on at like villas in South America. And he said that every agent within the DEA that he's worked with knows the whole thing is a sham. They know that they can't win the war on drugs. Would you say that was kind of your experience, that everyone you were surrounded with was aware that this was all completely futile? Or were you surrounded with people that were like true believers that thought they could actually fight and win this war on drugs?
People generally in law enforcement know that what they're doing is not something that's demanded by the market, but they don't want to go home and tell their kids, hey, daddy lives off of stolen money, and this is kind of a scam. And we go lecture people, tell them not to speed or do DUI checkpoints. It's just, they like to be perceived as having an honorable profession. But yeah, like the DEA guys I worked with, they knew it's like, way to make money, to get danger pay, and then we'd get hazardous duty pay and foreign assignments. And when I was in, South America, I'd get a free house that was provided by the embassy, they're people aware that the benefits they get out of it, but philosophically, that's not like they're really invested in it. Although if they need to do a presentation for a school, then they will actually do a presentation about the dangers of drugs and how all these nefarious people out there. But there's other things I figured out that probably don't have time to go into this, but right when I was hired, I actually went to the office of the hometown of Kiki Camarena, who was an agent that was, kidnapped and killed in Mexico. And the narrative we'd always been given was this was the cartels that did it. But actually, as I became part of the investigation to see how he died, it was called Operation Leyenda, actually discovered that the CIA actually led the torture session, and they recorded it on cassette tape, which we got a hold of the cassette tape, and we found out that the Rafael Caro Quintero, that he was the one that ostensibly tortured Kiki Camarena, that his ranch in Mexico, Rancho Veracruz, was being used as a staging area for the CIA to bring cocaine to the U.S. and to bring weapons back to Nicaragua. This was after Oliver North and was prevented from pursuing the Contra, affair in Mexico. There was actually a legislation in Congress that said no more money can be used for this war, the Contra war, and so they bypassed that by shipping drugs to the U.S. So we found this out, and there's actually an excellent series on Amazon that's free. It's called The Last Narc, that actually shows all of this, and it has the cooperating people that were in the room during the torture session that talked to us and put the finger on the CIA. It's a 4-part series, but it doesn't have pixelated images. It actually has the real people that were in the room witnessing the torture session.
Wild stuff. It's called what again on Amazon?
The Last Narc.
The Last Narc. Check that out. David Hathaway, thank you as always, man. I appreciate the expertise, appreciate your thoughts and sharing your story, man.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Chris.
Yep, hour number 3 is on the way. You can join the show here. This is Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live.
I look up on internet and tried to research some stuff that everybody's been talking about. And, it's all true.
What?
It's true.
What is?
Everything that's going on in this country.
The heck are you talking
Everything that you're talking about. I'm talking about 9/11.
We don't talk about that.
Everything.
Yeah, you're being incredibly vague.
I know what's going on. I mean, people get in an airplane and they talk about well, they were talking on this plane and they were doing this from that to this and that.
I have no idea
what you're talking about. Didn't work back then.
What is this and that? You need to be a lot less vague, because I don't know what you're talking about.
Everything, Dale. Everything is true.
Everything is true. Okay, that's going on in this country.
Yes, what I'm trying to tell. Everything is true, but they will not listen.
Everything.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Elon Musk has named a veteran media executive to replace him as CEO of Twitter. The billionaire who bought the company last year for $44 billion says Linda Yaccarino will start the job in around 6 weeks' time. FSN Silicon Valley correspondent Ira Spitzer has more.
Linda Yaccarino steps into the top job at Twitter after 12 years at NBC Universal, where she served as head of advertising. In a tweet announcing Yaccarino's appointment, Musk says she will focus primarily on business operations while he shifts to product design and new technology. The billionaire Tesla CEO has had a tumultuous tenure since purchasing the social media platform last October and taking it private. He's laid off almost 3/4 of the company's staff and overseen a chaotic rollout of a new paid subscription service.
Daniel Penny, the man accused of choking a homeless man to death on the New York subway, has been charged with second-degree manslaughter. The 24-year-old Marine veteran handed himself over to police on Friday morning. FSN's Jody Jacobs has more from court in New York.
In a short court appearance, Daniel Penny was charged and then released on $100,000 cash bail and ordered to turn over his passport. Penny is the man seen in a viral video choking Jordan Neely to death on board a train. Neely was a subway performer who was homeless. According to witnesses, he was begging for food and acting erratically. The performer's death sparked several protests here in New York City as people called on authorities to arrest Penny. If found guilty, the Marine veteran could face up to 15 years in prison. He will be back in court again on July 17. Jody Jacobs, New York.
An uneasy calm remains at the US southern border with Mexico after the pandemic-era policy Title 42, used to expel millions of asylum seekers, came to an end. The Biden administration has now set out sweeping new rules, opening up some alternative routes for immigrants while bringing in regulations meant to deter illegal crossings. FSN's Benji Hire reports from El Paso in Texas on the US-Mexico border.
There are approximately 60,000 people waiting to cross into the United States from Mexico, with the Department of Homeland Security warning of difficult days ahead. But the scene on the US side, at least for now, is one of calm, of order. Law enforcement personnel here insisting they have the tools they need to prepare for a potential influx. Nonetheless, El Paso remains in a state of emergency, as do many other cities along the border.
Pakistan's ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan has been granted bail for 2 weeks after being arrested earlier this week on corruption charges. His arrest has been called unlawful by the country's Supreme Court. From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking again today at Imran Khan, the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, who was arrested earlier this week on corruption charges, only to see the country's Supreme Court rule on Thursday that his detention was illegal. It's the latest twist and turn in an ongoing battle between Mr. Khan, ousted from power a year ago, and the current government. At stake, the timetable for the country's elections and the independence of the Pakistani judiciary.
The Supreme Court is actually, there is quite a bit of respect for the Supreme Court, but what's been happening lately is that this current government has curtailed the powers of the Supreme Court.
Mahtab Aziz is a UK lawyer who has represented Imran Khan in the past and says he's worried about the days ahead in Pakistan.
If you recall, there was an attempted assassination previously, and it has always been assumed that there will be multiple attempts at assassinating. That was just the first one. And then they tried to do it again previously in March when he was attending, like this situation now, when he attended court, they tried to assassinate him, but he managed to somehow escape. I really, truly fear for his life.
For now, the former Prime Minister is being forced to remain in a government guest house, even though the Supreme Court ruled that he should be freed immediately. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
And the main news again, Elon Musk has named a veteran media executive, Linda Yaccarino, to replace him as CEO of Twitter. Daniel Penny, the man accused of choking a homeless man to death on the New York subway, has been charged with second-degree manslaughter. And an uneasy calm remains at the US southern border with Mexico after the pandemic-era policy, Title 42, came to an end. There's more from us on Twitter at Feature Story. That's Feature Story News. Nick Harper reporting.
This is the Onion Week in Review. Gushing women voters announced Monday that they just can't help but feel an uncontrollable attraction to the sexist Republican Party. Saying they should know better but just can't resist the GOP's reckless neglect of women's health issues, smitten females across the country are reportedly driven wild by the GOP's blatant chauvinism.
I can't say no to bold, misogynistic politicians who think their authority extends to my uterus. Whenever you vote for a Republican, you feel like you're doing something a little bit naughty.
Top officials within the U.S. military acknowledged Wednesday that they were desperate to be given just one solid war they could really knock out of the park. Citing the recent string of messy, ambiguous military engagements in the Middle East, members of the Pentagon brass called for a conflict against a sovereign nation with a standing army and a clear-cut bad guy who employs conventional tactics and weaponry.
No roadside bombs, no plainclothes militants hiding out among innocent civilians. Just a fair fight where two sides shoot at each other and someone wins. We're absolutely great at that.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. You can join the show here, bring up whatever you want to talk about. The number, 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Joining you tonight is Ian
and Chris.
You can join us online over at freetalklive.com and enjoy the features that we have waiting for you there. That, again, is freetalklive.com. Archives go back for many years. You can download as many as you like. We're going to go back to your phone calls, and then we're going to get into this story about the latest attack on privacy, specifically on end-to-end encryption technology, and we'll tell you what it's all about. They're claiming it's going to stop child pornography if they can just stop encryption. So we'll get to that coming up here. But first, we got Major Payne on the line in Michigan. You're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead, Major.
Hey, good evening. Yeah, the sheriff must have about a decade on me because when Nixon pulled all that shenanigans, I was only about 13, and I guess I hadn't started paying attention yet. So I did not have a clue about that one either.
Yeah, you're referring to Sheriff David Hathaway from Santa Cruz County in Arizona, border county there, who came out or just mentioned on the air that apparently the DEA was founded on the very same day that Congress ended the war in Vietnam, and it was done by an executive order, apparently, by Tricky Dick, which I had no idea.
I remember all the Watergate scandal because they made such a stink about it on the news.
Yeah.
You couldn't help but get impregnated in your brain.
What
But
else, Major?
well, on this crazy guy on the subway,
yeah,
you got to figure that this Marine that is accused of this crime here, which he turned himself in too, he wasn't arrested,
Okay.
and they still kicked him for $100K on bail. Which
It's crazy.
Is, that's an absurd amount of money for a guy that turned himself in. But
I see what you're
anyway,
saying.
So you got to say you got to figure he's a current frequent flyer on the subway, and probably most of the riders he's with are too. Well, this crazy guy has a long history of being a pain in the tuchus down there in the tube, as the Europeans like to say.
Okay.
And he's known to just walk up and punch people in the head. I don't think he confronts them. I think he just walks up behind and busts them in the head.
Oh, God.
And he's done this to a 65-year-old woman. He's done this to a 67-and-a-half-year-old woman. And
Okay,
at
but the question is, did he do it on the day in question?
Yeah.
According to one witness, he did not. He just simply was yelling.
You gotta wait until somebody's an actual threat before you use especially such extreme violence against them.
I don't know, but if you've seen this guy in action and you know what he's capable of doing, would that not pretty much give you gratis to protect yourself?
No. That gives you gratis to be alert, not to use violence, especially not until he's actually gone or going and directing himself at somebody.
Well, if the cops had have done their job in this particular part of the tube where this guy was known to roam, he would have been in jail, not in the grave.
For what? What would the charge be?
He had a warrant out for him at the time this all went down.
Well, you can count on the police to not be doing their job. So,
Yeah.
I get what you're saying here. You're saying that if someone was on this train that knew who this guy was, like if they'd been on the train with this character before and they remembered him and they'd seen him attack.
Even talk to somebody that had been smacked in the head. I mean, people talk, right? They're sitting on the platform waiting for the train. Oh, I seen that crazy guy do some stuff you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
I mean,
I get what you're arguing, but it's still not a legal basis to attack somebody preemptively. I mean, what you're essentially saying is because you know the person has a history of violence, therefore it should be okay to use a preemptive attack against them. And I think that at least the libertarian viewpoint on that is no, that's not okay, because the individual in this, at least in this instance, did not use an aggressive act against anyone, at least according to the witness account that we read. Now, maybe other witnesses remember things differently, because that's what witnesses do, is they remember things differently.
This is true.
But according to the one witness, the man was ranting and raving about being hungry or thirsty. He, at one point, threw his jacket onto the ground and then was choked out by this guy.
well, Jet called in earlier and he was talking about like 35 seconds to put him out. And that's if you get a perfect grab. And what you've done is pinched off both the arteries going to the brain, the jugulars. And if this guy was wiggling and squirming, he might not, and had a good hold, the guy might not have stopped kicking for 2.5 minutes. I don't know. I wasn't there.
I wasn't either, thankfully. I don't live in New York City.
Yeah.
Anything else, Major?
Well, there's a crazy politician down in Argentina. I've had a story in my back pocket for about a week. I don't know if you want to talk about it. He wants to eliminate Britain or the whole damn government.
Hey, all right. That sounds pretty good.
Well, he's a young fella, and he has evidently got a wild head of hair and some big mutton chop sideburns and wears a biker jacket. And he's ranting and railing about the government, this, that, and the other thing. He's got like 24% of the youth support already.
What's his name?
But the only downfall I see in his plan is that he wants to eliminate the peso as the national currency and go to the dollar.
That's actually probably a smart move.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Is the peso better than the dollar? Or is the dollar
Dude, they have at 104% inflation down there. The best thing they can do is get rid of the peso. Now, I'm no fan of the dollar, but at least it's not had 104% inflation. So, I mean, from a monetary perspective, that's probably a fiscally sound policy.
Yeah, I don't know if going to the dollar is the best move, but certainly moving away from the peso is.
Yeah, I mean, look, like I said, the dollar sucks, but it ain't 104% inflation yet. It might be next year for all we know. I mean, it's 5% right now, or just under 5% according to the government's numbers, which we know are highly manipulated. But even at 10%, that's still 1/10 of the inflation of what they're dealing with in Argentina at the moment. And to eliminate the peso is to eliminate their central bank. I mean, that would be a large step in the right direction to allow people to at least, have an alternative.
How about eliminating the central bank, but without moving to the dollar?
Well, yeah, that would be nice, but you're talking to politicians here, right? So, I mean, they're not going to propose moving to Bitcoin. They're just not going to. Sure. They're not going to do that. I mean, even in El Salvador, where Bitcoin has been made a legal tender alongside the dollar, because El Salvador did the same thing. They used to have, I don't know if it was a peso or whatever it was, but they had their own central bank currency. They got rid of it. They dollarized instead. There's been no central bank shenanigans there ever since because it's gone.
Yep.
And then they approved Bitcoin, but even though it's quote unquote legal tender, they're not mandating it per se.
Yeah, I mean,
there hasn't been a lot of adoption.
It seems like the best solution is to let the free market figure it out.
Yes, yes, that would be the best solution.
Maybe they do gold backs, or they would, who knows what would happen. But
Major, thanks for bringing it up. I do appreciate the call tonight, and I actually had a story about Argentina in show prep here tonight, so I'll just jump into that. It's not very lengthy. It's just an update on what's going on with their currency collapse there. By the way, Argentina this isn't the first time they've had crazy inflation in Argentina. And they also did a bail-in, as you call it, or a haircut on the bank accounts there 20 years ago in Argentina.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so this isn't the first time they've dealt with this.
Yep.
But according to Bloomberg, their fight to prevent its problematic currency from total meltdown is leaving the central bank, by some estimates, broke. The South American nation has already spent all of its liquid international reserves, plus another estimated $1 billion, according to Buenos Aires-based consulting firm 1816 Economia y Strategia, raising the stakes as the nation contends with a historic drought and impending recession. Without easy-to-spend cash on hand, questions are swirling about how much longer the government can continue to defend the peso from an all-out collapse. At risk is a currency devaluation that stands to fan 104% inflation, that's over the last year, and exacerbate high levels of social unrest ahead of October's presidential elections. Fernando Losada, the managing director at Oppenheimer & Company, said the fewer reserves leads to more pressure on the exchange rate, which in turn leads to more pressure on inflation. He says, I see no possible scenario under which inflation goes below 3 digits this year. Argentina has struggled to build and keep international reserves at healthy levels for decades, running through cash piles to combat rising prices and juggle obligations on overseas bonds. The nation now technically has less than $34 billion in foreign reserves remaining, but the majority is locked up in less liquid assets such as gold, credit swap lines with China, and the Bank of International Settlements, and the dollars that Argentines have in their savings accounts. That's a problem for a country in need of ready-to-spend cash. Argentina's liabilities in foreign currency already exceed their total reserves by about $1 billion, which is the worst such ratio since the nation was racked by economic crisis in the early 2000s. According to a reporting firm. It's been flying through its dollar reserves as it tries to stop a slide in the peso's parallel market exchange rate, which has replaced the government's official currency rate amid draconian capital controls. In just the last week, the central bank sold about $470 million to support the currency in parallel markets. That means they're buying their own currency, is what it sounds like, right? They're taking their dollar reserves, selling them, and using that to buy their own currency up. I think I'm reading that correctly,
I think so.
Right? So, I mean, this is totally artificial, what they're doing here. They're doing a desperate last-ditch attempt to save the peso. And you can't fight against 104% inflation, right? Like, it's over. It's just the question is, how far from over is it? Like, when's the, we've seen in Venezuela, they've been scraping the bottom of the barrel for most of the last decade at this point. So just because they're running out of cash doesn't mean that the government's going to fall immediately. It's been difficult to measure the success of the government's intervention. The unofficial peso lost about 13% against the U.S. dollar last month, and it's down 33% so far this year, by far the biggest decline in key emerging markets. The parallel peso rate, known as the blue chip swap locally, is lingering near the all-time low in April. The president, Alberto Fernandez, has in the past attempted to beef up reserves by forcing dollars earned from exports to flow into central bank accounts and by accepting International Monetary Fund cash injections. But those measures are largely falling flat. And Fernandez, who has already withdrawn his candidacy for re-election.
Wow.
I mean, imagine being so embarrassed as a politician. I mean, you know how these guys are. They are all about themselves and promoting themselves, and this guy's just throwing his hat in the. I mean, he's done. He's out. He's withdrawn from the election. He has no guarantees that talks to rework a $44 billion program with the IMF will result in sped up loan disbursements to ease the situation. Of course, you know that when the IMF loans money, it comes along with some pretty draconian terms.
Oh, yeah.
They will own a lot if you don't pay them back, right? And so where's the money going to come from to pay the IMF back for a $44 billion loan if you don't even have, $1 billion to play with? Spokesperson for their central bank said the market's calculation of net reserves doesn't properly reflect its balance sheet because it fails to account for other sources of financing, such as a currency swap line with China. So China's going to come to their rescue, is what they're saying. Officials have opted for other emergency measures, including tapping the China swap to finance $1.8 billion of imports from the country. It's working with Brazil to boost bilateral trade with credit lines in reals, allowing it to bypass the dollar. Scarred by the central bank's decision to freeze access to dollar savings during the 2001 economic crisis, many Argentines are pulling cash from their savings accounts. They yanked over $1 billion U.S. dollar deposits from the banking system from just late March to the end of April. And these are poor people, right? We're seeing similar things happening here in the United States, where the PacWest Bank just was in the news yesterday for another announcement that they have been losing more deposits. It was, I believe, the announcement was that in 1 week, they lost 10% of their deposits at PacWest Bank in the United States. So, I mean, there's definitely a lot more money to play with here in the United States. The PacWest has not yet been completely frozen out. The FDIC hasn't taken them over, but their stock's at like $4.55, down from, let's see, what was it just 2 months ago? $26.
Yeah, this is like one of these situations where it's like, if you haven't pulled money out yet, you probably should. You should have some little bit of cash stashed away.
Right.
Maybe something that isn't dollars, because who knows what's going to happen to the dollar.
Well, in the case of Argentina, the dollar looks like a safe space compared to the Argentine peso, and that's why they're pulling their dollars out.
When your currency is collapsing, everything looks like a safer space.
There are also a few signs that the reserves can be built anytime soon. The worst drought of the century has all but removed any possibility of an influx of cash from agricultural exports before the elections. Juan Sola, economist at Bank Trust in Buenos Aires, said the risk of having liquid reserves in negative territory is the central bank may not have the dollars needed to meet an even stronger outflow of foreign exchange deposits. So it sounds like an absolute mess down there. Obviously, cryptocurrency is a potential solution for some of the Argentinian folks who are facing tough times. Of course, Bitcoin is not a solution for these people, because Bitcoin's fees are going crazy. I was, eyeballing those earlier today. Let me get the latest numbers on that. They're updated, every 10 minutes roughly, according to mempool.space. They had gone down to as low as approximately $1 for low, quote unquote, low priority transactions. But earlier today, it was like back up to $5 for that. Right now, the site is not responding, so I don't know what the current fee rates are. But if you're in a poor country, you, by definition, cannot afford $3 per transaction. You probably make a little bit more in South America than you do in some of the African nations, but I don't know. I don't know what your typical take-home pay for a day's labor in Argentina is. If you do know and you're down there and you want to comment on the situation where they're facing over 100% inflation, feel free to weigh in here. The number is 603-283-6160. But
I don't think, if I'm not mistaken, Argentina they're not as bad economically by comparison to most of your African countries. They're probably they're probably, I don't want to say they're closer to the United States, but they're closer to the United States than they are to African countries, even with the economic collapse here.
Yeah, like I said, I don't have the numbers in front of me here, but I did just get the update from the mempool site, and fees are down compared to what they were last weekend, where they were as high as $15 to $20 for a low priority transaction. Right now, it's $1.12, which is pretty standard for Bitcoin these days. Of course, Bitcoin back in the day, it used to be like, 2 cents or 1 cent. So $1 is still 100 times what Bitcoin used to be back when things were good with Bitcoin. So you got to have something else. If you're going to get into cryptocurrency as an alternative to a state currency, you got to have something useful. You got to have something you can buy a cup of coffee with, or buy a taco or a hamburger or whatever with. And Dash, of course, is a great solution for that.
I do have an answer for you on what the
Argentinians are making.
Yeah, average wage in Argentina is.
Sure.
It's higher than you probably would think. It's $1,386 a month. So that's not bad at all.
What was it?
$1,386 US dollars a month.
All right, so
that's not bad at all.
Let's presume they've got 40-hour work week down there. Yeah. That's 160 hours, right? So we're talking about $8 a day. $8 to $9 a day. If that's a monthly.
That's monthly,
right?
1,300. What did I say? 1,300.
Oh, I'm sorry, not per day. That's per.
Right.
That's per hour. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
it's not bad. Anyway, either way, having sub-cent fees on your cryptocurrency that you are getting into is way better than having dollar fees or $5 fees or $10 fees like you're going to get with Bitcoin BTC these days. So you want to look into Dash. It's digital cash. And Free Talk Live this hour is brought to you by Dash. It's the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. It's right there in the name. And last year, by the way, Dash launched a killer app that, at least for folks here in the United States, allows you to spend Dash at over 155,000 locations, including major retailers. They're all over the place. And the best part about this is you get a discount for paying with Dash, which is finally a reason to spend your cryptocurrency. The app is called Dash Direct. It's available on your Android or Apple App Store. One of the cool things about this is each store or each company offers a different discount with Dash Direct. So you might get 4 or 5% discount at one place. You might get 8 or 9% discount at another place. You might get less than 2% at some other places. So it just depends on where you're going and what the deal is. But in most places, in other cryptocurrencies, other gift cards, because basically what Dash Direct is doing is buying gift cards for these places. The other online places where you can get gift cards for crypto, you don't get a discount. You don't get a better deal because you're going to pay with Bitcoin or what are the other cryptos. Dash is the only one that I've ever seen that offers a discount for using Dash Direct, which is super cool. I wish I could try it myself, but I'm prohibited by the federal government from doing it. Captain Kickass, however, has been doing this for much longer. He's one of our co-hosts. He's been doing Dash Direct since long before they sponsored the show. So he's a big fan of it. So check it out for yourself. It's again on the Android or Apple App Store. Over 155,000 locations, allowing you to actually spend your Dash to buy the things you need to live your life. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies, and it's widely available on exchanges and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get Dash. It's easy to use Dash. You can start by learning more at dash.org. And big thanks to the Dash Decentralized Autonomous Organization for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. You can visit dash.org and learn about Dash. That's dash.org. As we continue here, we were talking about the Argentinian currency crisis down there, which maybe they're going to get out of. I don't know who this guy was. We had Major Payne brought it up. There's apparently a presidential candidate who's proposing to end the peso, which would be one of the smartest moves they could possibly make. Hopefully we'll hear good news for those people down there about that. But meanwhile, we go to your phone calls and thoughts here. We've got Major Payne in the butt calling from New Mexico. You're on Free Talk Live.
You can call me in the butt. first of all, I wanted to talk about some legal aspects of the New York thing, subway thing, that haven't been mentioned.
Yeah, what about
first of all, here's a segue. Would have been good to ask the Sheriff Hathaway about that incident, because he's not only a sheriff but a lawyer, or I'm sorry, at least he went through law school. I don't know if he bothered to do the bar thing or whatever, but he could answer a bunch of questions.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know if he's familiar with the case, but either way, what are your thoughts?
He is. I guarantee you. Hey, David, and David can tell you himself. I guarantee you, he's got opinions on many intricate aspects of that case that would be helpful to you. And talking about Sheriff Hathaway, I am generally supportive of what I hear from him, and I would invite him.
We'll find out what your invitation is here in a moment. There's more coming up. You can join the show. The number is 603-283-6160. Whether you want to talk about currencies, alternatives to government monies. In fact, we haven't even touched on this privacy issue that we've been teasing all night. I hope we can get to that because it's pretty important, from the Electronic Frontier Foundation. That's coming up too. It's Free Talk Live.
Hi, I'm Derek J. To me, an activist's calling is to actively work to advance a cause. The cause for which I work is personal freedom. I believe my life is best when I engage in voluntary interactions and self-government. I reject the idea that anyone else has a higher claim to my life or my body than I do. I see people who call themselves the government as a threat to my personal freedom. I realize you may feel differently, but my relationship with the people who call themselves the government is completely involuntary. If Starbucks used some of its money to drop bombs, I wouldn't shop there. So why would I support the American empire? The empire does not require my consent.
Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree. Watch it for free and order the Director's Cut DVD at victimlesscrimespree.com. That's victimlesscrimespree.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Elon Musk has named a veteran media executive to replace him as CEO of Twitter. The billionaire, who bought the company last year for $44 billion, says Linda Yaccarino will start the job in around 6 weeks' time. FSN Silicon Valley correspondent Ira Spitzer has more.
Linda Yaccarino steps into the top job at Twitter after 12 years at NBC Universal, where she served as head of advertising. In a tweet announcing Yaccarino's appointment, Musk says she will focus primarily on business operations while he shifts to product design and new technology. The billionaire Tesla CEO has had a tumultuous tenure since purchasing the social media platform last October and taking it private. He's laid off almost 3/4 of the company's staff and overseen a chaotic rollout of a new paid subscription service.
Daniel Penny, the man accused of choking a homeless man to death on the New York subway, has been charged with second-degree manslaughter. The 24-year-old Marine veteran handed himself over to police on Friday morning. FSN's Jody Jacobs has more from court in New York.
In a short court appearance, Daniel Penny was charged and then released on $100,000 cash bail and ordered to turn over his passport. Penny is the man seen in a viral video choking Jordan Neely to death on board a train. Neely was a subway performer who was homeless. According to witnesses, he was begging for food and acting erratically. The performer's death sparked several protests here in New York City as people called on authorities to arrest Penny. If found guilty, the Marine veteran could face up to 15 years in prison. He will be back in court again on July 17. Jody Jacobs, New York.
An uneasy calm remains at the US southern border with Mexico after the pandemic-era policy Title 42, used to expel millions of asylum seekers, came to an end. The Biden administration has now set out sweeping new rules, opening up some alternative routes for immigrants while bringing in regulations meant to deter illegal crossings. FSN's Benji Heyer reports from El Paso in Texas on the US-Mexico border.
There are approximately 60,000 people waiting to cross into the United States from Mexico, with the Department of Homeland Security warning of difficult days ahead. But the scene on the US side, at least for now, is one of calm, of order. Law enforcement personnel here insisting they have the tools they need to prepare for a potential influx. Nonetheless, El Paso remains in a state of emergency, as do many other cities along the border.
Pakistan's ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan has been granted bail for 2 weeks after being arrested earlier this week on corruption charges. His arrest has been called unlawful by the country's Supreme Court. From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. You can join the show here. We have time for you, but you got to dial in shortly. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Ian and Chris here in the studio. We're going to continue. We have our caller on from New Mexico. He calls himself Major Pain in the rear. We got David here.
Wait a minute. My real name is Major Pain in the word you won't let me say that has an A and two S's in it.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I'm forced to not be able to use my real name.
Yeah, blame the FCC.
Well, wait a minute, though. You're the one that established the protocol. We were not going to use the A with the S's. We were going to use the B with the U and the couple of T's. And now you're changing my name again to rear. So what is going on here, Ian?
I don't know. Why don't you just get to the point that you're trying to make here tonight? You were saying something about David Hathaway, the sheriff.
Yes, we'll argue this in the time. David Hathaway, hi, how you doing? I'm David Olson in New Mexico. I lived many years in Arizona, and I'm now just across the border in New Mexico. And it's very refreshing that a sheriff voluntarily wants to make himself available on the radio. And there are many things that I'd like to ask you about the sheriff's, any sheriff, not just you, role in the freedom regarding people, citizens, that other people are not going to get around to asking you. And I would invite you to allow me to ask you some questions. And I'm on your side. This is not a gotcha situation, but I'd invite you to allow me to ask you questions here in this forum. Moving on.
What's one question you would want to ask? I mean, he is a listener of the show, so there's a good chance he is going to hear it.
That was one question right there for the listener who was paying attention. I asked about the role of a sheriff regarding freedom here in the United States, and then it just goes on and broadens from there, bringing in.
That's a pretty broad question.
That's why I want him to come on the air and let me ask more specific questions so that it doesn't have to be through.
Well, the odds that you're going to be on the air at the same time as Sheriff David Hathaway are pretty low.
Ian, you can make it happen. Don't play dumb.
Pretty low. It's a possibility, though. If I see your call on hold while he's on, I will consider that you want to talk to him and bring you on there. No, let's move on. Indeed. Thank you for the call tonight. And let's talk to this caller. You're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead.
Hi there. I think it's Major Payne who's talking about the politician in Argentina named Milei.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't know what his name was, and Major Payne from Michigan did not know either. Milei? How do you spell it?
Milei.
Okay.
Javier Milei. I think that's how you pronounce it. He's actually explicitly a libertarian. And he's not just for using the U.S. dollar. He's for total currency competition, period. Crypto, gold, silver, everything.
Wow, that's pretty cool. What else do you know about this guy?
Well, my understanding is the way Argentine politics work is that you don't have a party that runs a presidential candidate. I could be wrong on this, but I think there's basically coalitions, and the coalitions have to select a candidate. So he's actually got a really good chance of becoming the presidential candidate of the main opposition party or coalition.
Wow.
And could possibly become president. But he's explicitly a libertarian, explicitly an Austrian economics. I think he's an economist or an economics professor. But that guy is amazing.
Have you seen him speak? Are you familiar with him?
I follow his Twitter. Sometimes I see his stuff. I read articles about him occasionally. But they've got a pretty robust libertarian movement down there in Argentina, actually, especially among the youth. So he's got something like 24% support, which is really amazing with a political, I forget what they call that type of situation, where it's kind of like Germany, where you have to create a coalition of support to become president. So basically, I think if your party gets 4% of the vote, you get 4% of the seats in their parliament or whatever. I think it's something like that, but I can't swear to it. But he's got a decent shot at becoming president.
That would be really awesome for the people of Argentina. Whether he would be hamstrung by whatever their parliament is another question, right? Like that was always the old concern here in the United States, is if Ron Paul, by some miracle, could have actually won election to the presidency, he would then still be up against 535 psychos in Congress that would have had, have no belief whatsoever in the ideas of liberty. So I don't know what one man can do in Argentina or how powerful the presidency is there. Do you have any idea?
I think the president probably has as much power as the favors they can dole out, regardless of whether it's constitutional or not. That's my guess, like anywhere else.
How many contenders are there in this election? If Milei has 24% in the polls, is he up against 3 other guys or 2? Do you know? Do you have any idea?
That I don't know. It's just really interesting. He's basically like a young version of Ron Paul. He does have a big, crazy coif of hair and big mutton chops. I think his symbol is a lion with a big mane, but he's got a big disheveled head of hair and handsome guy, so he's kind of got that charismatic politician vibe going. He's young, but yeah, he's a real firebrand.
All right, cool. Definitely somebody to look into. I'll have to see if I can pull him up on social media and see if he's got interesting things to say. Thanks for the call tonight, man. Anything else you want to share about it?
No, that's pretty much it.
All right, excellent. I appreciate hearing from you. And certainly in tough economic times, I think you're going to find more people are going to be open to more libertarian ideas, or at least I would hope so. I mean, I know, Chris, that you want to just recruit libertarians to move to New Hampshire, and I think that is the shortest path to potential victory. But we still also have to convince our neighbors, to some extent, to support libertarians running for office, whether they're running as Republicans or Democrats or whatever. So there is still some convincing and some persuading that needs to be done. And if people are having a tough time and the libertarians have the sensible solution, then maybe people will pay attention. Maybe that's what's going to happen in Argentina.
Yeah, I mean,
unless they kill him before the election.
I'm not like against putting out a more palatable, I guess, to the masses message as far as like people wanting to get elected that are libertarian. Like, I get that, like, not everybody is. I think there's 2 different things you can do. One is, stick to the most libertarian thing you can say and do to get people to move here, and then there's also the sort of approach of, okay, well, let's see what we I want to get elected, and this is something I think we can actually get through that may not be anywhere near as far as we want to go, but it's palatable and you can actually get through. So there's kind of 2 approaches, and I don't necessarily know that they're exclusive or anything. You could probably do both at the same time even.
Let's go to the phones here. Neil is in Arizona. You're on Free Talk Live. Neil.
Ian, where in the hell do you get your patience with some of your callers?
Just practice, Neil. What's on your mind tonight?
Oh, I just wanted to call in and say hi to you. And I'm just listening. And I wanted to tell you something I heard on Alex Jones today.
Okay.
I have heard many people refer to Joe Biden in different names, calling him. He's not much to talk about. But I heard Alex Jones today. He called him, it was hilarious, a walking colostomy bag.
Well, I mean, it's pretty common for talk show hosts to have various different insulting names for the politicians that are in office. I mean, it's pretty common.
It definitely fits Joe Biden, though. But anyhow, I'm trying to save up some money to come out there and see you at the Porcupine Festival. I don't know if I'll be able to do it, and you have said you don't know for sure if you're going to be there, correct?
Yeah, at this point, we're waiting on a judge's decision as to whether or not I will have the ability to leave my house for an event like that. So that is hopefully going to be decided before the event, but we have no guarantees.
Unfortunately, unsurprisingly, the prosecutor is fighting it. tooth and nail. So
right, yeah, I would say don't make your decision dependent on me. The event has thousands of attendees, many of whom you'll probably really enjoy meeting. Some of the hosts of Free Talk Live will be there. I know Aria is saying she's going to go.
I will definitely be there.
Chris is going to be there, and probably Captain Kickass and some others as well. So,
well, I am definitely going to try to make it if I can find where your booth is set up. It's kind of tough putting. You know how money's tight these days.
Sure.
But I'm going to try.
All right, man. Was there anything else you wanted to share?
No, not really. I mean, you pretty much know where this world is going. You don't need us to call you and tell you.
Thank you for the call tonight. Hopefully you'll be at the Porcupine Freedom Festival. You'll have a great time, whether or not I am there, I'm sure. So the story here that we mentioned at the very beginning of the show from the Electronic Frontier Foundation is about a U.S. Senate bill that is threatening security and free speech on the Internet. It is entitled the Stop CSAM Act of 2023. Which would undermine, according to the EFF, services offering end-to-end encryption and force Internet companies to take down lawful user content. The bill is aimed at removing from the Internet child sexual abuse material, which is what CSAM stands for, also known as child pornography. Existing law already requires online service providers who have actual knowledge of apparent CSAM on their platforms to report that content to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which is essentially a government entity.
Pseudo-government entity.
Yeah, they link to another story about that. NCMEC then forwards actionable reports to law enforcement agencies for investigation. However, the Stop CSAM Act goes much further. This bill applies to, quote, interactive computer services, unquote, which broadly includes private messaging and email apps, social media platforms, cloud storage providers, and many other internet intermediaries and online service providers. The bill does four main things. It makes it a crime for providers to, quote, knowingly host or store, unquote, CSAM, or to, quote, knowingly promote or facilitate, unquote, the sexual exploitation of children, including the creation of CSAM on their platforms. It creates a new civil claim and corresponding Section 230 carve-out to encourage private lawsuits against internet companies and app stores for the so-called promotion or facilitation of child exploitation, the hosting or storing of child pornography, or for making child pornography available to any person, all based on the very low standard of negligence. It requires providers to remove apparent CSAM when they obtain actual knowledge of the content on their platforms. It requires a notice and takedown system overseen by a newly created Child Online Protection Board, requiring providers to remove or disable content upon request, even before an administrative or judicial determination that the content is in fact CSAM. The bill threatens security by undermining the viability of end-to-end encryption services. Some of the things I just read don't sound too bad on their face, but let's dig into what the EFF has to say about what they actually mean. The bill makes it a crime to knowingly, quote, host or store child pornography, or to, quote, promote or facilitate, unquote, the sexual exploitation of children. The bill also opens the door for civil lawsuits against providers for the negligent promotion or facilitation of conduct relating to child exploitation, the hosting or storing of child pornography, and or for making child pornography available to any person. The terms promote and facilitate are broad, and civil liability may be imposed based on a very low negligence standard, the lowest state of mind standard under the law. This is the same standard applied to legal cases involving car accidents and other situations where the defendant did not intend for harm to result, but it did nevertheless, due to carelessness or even simply a failure to act. Creating new criminal and civil claims against providers based on broad terms and low standards will undermine digital security for all internet users because the law already prohibits the distribution of CSAM. The bill's broad terms could be interpreted as reaching more passive conduct, like merely providing an encrypted application. Due to the nature of their services, encrypted communications providers who receive a takedown notice may be deemed to have so-called knowledge under the criminal law, even if they cannot verify and act on that takedown notice. And there's no doubt that plaintiffs' lawyers will wrongly argue that merely providing an encrypted service that can be used to store any image, not necessarily CSAM, negligently facilitates the sharing of illegal content.
There are so many problems with the law and the way this whole thing, even in the way the laws exist now. I mean, think about it for a moment. If you are in, I don't know, like Saudi Arabia, right? And there's their standards are like, if there's any, like, for example, with girls and women, if there's any facial, exposure of skin, like, for example, a headshot, that would be kiddie porn. That's kiddie porn in Saudi Arabia. Where is that line in the United States, or is that line even the same across the United States?
Indeed, and what I think what they're saying here, though, is the encrypted communications providers, end-to-end encryption means that the provider doesn't have access to the content.
Right. They wouldn't even know about it unless they were told. But if they're told, they won't be able to remove it because they don't actually have control over it.
Right. And I think that's the concern here.
That's the concern, but there's multiple concerns with these sorts of laws. It's you. If you don't have control over something, how can you be held liable?
How can you judge whether or not to remove it?
Right. It's like somebody reporting to law enforcement that the post office delivered, some kiddie porn in a sealed envelope that the postal worker didn't know about, but now they know about it having existed. But they can't take it out of the mail system because it's already been delivered.
Or can you arrest the post office worker for the things that they did to get the package to the door?
Right.
And what they're saying here is that the way this law could be interpreted by plaintiffs' attorneys is that just simply having an encrypted service could be, lawsuit worthy, essentially. Not every platform will have the resources to fight these threats in court, especially newcomers that compete with entrenched giants like Meta and Google. Encrypted platforms should not have to rely on prosecutorial discretion or favorable court rulings after protracted litigation. Instead, specific exemptions for encrypted providers should be addressed in the text of the bill. And I suspect that hasn't happened yet because the EFF is still pushing people to oppose this bill. The bill also threatens free speech by adding a new exception to Section 230. We've talked about Section 230 on a number of occasions here. It is that part of the internet law in the United States that basically gives, as they describe it here, partial immunity to internet intermediaries when they're sued for content posted by their users, essentially meaning that if you go on Facebook or Twitter or our own social media site and you post something offensive, somebody sues, it's a libel or whatever it is that you post, and then there's a lawsuit over that. Essentially, it's Facebook or the centralized host can say, hey, look, we're not liable for what our users say. Our users are liable for what they say, not the hosting company.
Yeah, why would you even hold a third party liable for something that another party does?
Because they have money.
Yeah. Clearly this is about the money. It's clearly about somebody, you really have to wonder how these laws even get proposed in the first place. Who's proposing them? Do we know who's proposing this? I mean,
Congress people. I don't know which ones offhand.
Yeah, like somebody has an objective of making money off something.
That's a good point.
Because
how that would be,
like, why would anybody even think this is a good idea?
Creating a new exception to Section 230 that allows providers to be sued for, quote, facilitating, unquote, child sexual exploitation merely based on the provision of a platform that hosts third-party content will harm free speech online. Section 230 creates the legal breathing room for internet intermediaries to create online spaces for people to freely communicate around the world with low barriers to entry. However, creating a new exception that exposes providers to more lawsuits will cause them to limit that legal exposure. Online services will censor more and more user content and accounts with minimal regard as to whether that content is in fact legal. Some platforms may even be forced to shut down or may not even get off the ground in the first place.
How do you allow any kind of imagery or video on any platform if you're going to be liable? Because there's no way for a provider to scan that content to the degree that they can, they're going to get
easily
collisions and false positives. And then do you remove every single image automatically? And then do you report that to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children?
Or else you might be possibly sued for facilitating child sexual exploitation.
It's one thing where a provider is made aware of and actually can see it and evaluate it. But even that can be expensive, right? So the default is going to be to
take it down,
or
not allow it in the first place. Just no more images.
Well, right.
On balance, this harms all internet users who rely on intermediaries to connect with their communities and the world at large. The bill also threatens free speech by requiring providers to take down potentially lawful content before a legal determination that it is, in fact, CSAM. Again, child sexual abuse materials, what that stands for. The Act's removal provisions pose significant threats to free speech online. In one provision, not only must providers report apparent CSAM to this agency after obtaining actual knowledge as required by existing law, they must now remove it from their services without a judicial determination that the content is in fact illegal CSAM. We already know that some reports can be incorrect. And then they link to a totally different story about that headline.
Some reports, I think it's a good percentage of reports are actually incorrect.
This headline from the EFF site is, Google scans private photos lead to false accusations of child abuse.
Yep.
In another provision, the bill creates a convoluted notice and takedown regime overseen by a new Child Online Protection Board, where individuals may file complaints against companies to remove alleged CSAM from their platforms. The system is ripe to be gamed by bad actors, leaving lawful user content exposed to bogus takedown requests. First Amendment protected content involving sexuality, sexual orientation, or gender identity will likely be targets of frivolous takedown notices.
I can just see the right going on and posting or reports, people on the right reporting every single young person who is trans, for example, as being child pornography, when that's not the case.
Just because it's a topless photo or something like that.
Because they don't like it. Yeah, they don't like the fact that somebody is presenting themselves as the opposite sex.
Right. And of course, there won't be any penalty for someone doing a false report.
Right.
Right. Because they'll just say, well, I thought it was.
Right. And remember, there's different standards. People in the Middle East might start reporting things because, there's a picture of a girl or a boy, that isn't covered, or well, probably a girl in this case, but her without a full facial head covering. Yeah. I forget, what is it called? A full veil?
There's different terms. The burqa would be the full-on cover where you can only see the eyes.
Right. This is something the Muslims I
don't think burqas are in Saudi Arabia, though. I think that's like other places.
Sudan, wherever. It doesn't really matter. The point is that it depends on a person's, background, what they're going to consider to be, child pornography. In Europe, they don't consider nudity to be, naked kids to be child pornography.
That's true.
That's probably going to be the case especially if you go down maybe south or just maybe even across the United States.
The notice and takedown procedures work like this. In response to a takedown notice, providers must either 1, remove the content within 2 days, or 2, notify the user they're unable to do so through reasonable means. A provider can also informally contact the complainant if it believes the content is in fact protected speech. But if that doesn't work, a provider's only remedy is to disable the content and challenge the takedown notice at the board. Even if a provider wins a challenge to the takedown notice, the fact that legal content can be taken offline before a final decision is antithetical to free speech. And I would interject here, how many of these providers are going to spend significant time and effort trying to defend your posts? Right. They don't have time for that. They're just going to delete it.
You could post a picture of an elephant, and if somebody reports that as child pornography, you can be guaranteed it's going to be taken down. No questions asked. There probably won't even be a person who looks at it.
Moreover, because of patently unconstitutional gag rules surrounding the board's review, the creator of protected content that is subject of a frivolous takedown request will not be put on notice of the process until the final determination. There are other reasons to question the quasi-judicial board process. It's likely to be underfunded and understaffed to adjudicate internet-wide takedown disputes. Additionally, the board process appears to be voluntary, and to participate, parties must first agree to give up the right to have the dispute decided by a federal court. This all assumes, however, that providers will fight the frivolous content complaints in the first place, which was what I was thinking. It is more likely that providers will be incentivized to simply remove lawful content subject to a complaint to avoid the expense and burden of an administrative or judicial process. They say Congress should avoid passing a law that will undermine security and free speech online. Instead, they can encourage the executive branch to enforce the existing laws. Since 2008, providers have faced large fines if they fail to report CSAM after receiving actual knowledge of its presence on their platforms. Yet we know of no case where the federal government has ever enforced this provision. So you can take action on this at the EFF website. We'll put a link up for you on our social media, which is social.freetalklive.com. If you're following the @FTL account, That'll have the link there to this story, which has a take action option if you want to bother to try to ask these psychos to do something reasonable in this particular case.
It's for show anyway, probably anyway. I doubt it's going to be enforced because it's just so crazy.
Back tomorrow night. Online in the meantime, you can join us at freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. In addition to being one of the world's first cryptocurrencies, Dash was the first crypto project to have a decentralized autonomous organization that to this day continues to improve and promote Dash. Every month, 10% of the mining rewards go into a treasury. Anyone with one Dash to spend can put forward a proposal to the Dash masternodes to vote on. The masternodes vet the proposals and decide which ones move forward and are funded by the Treasury. In fact, that's exactly how we got this sponsorship. Nowadays, DAOs are plentiful, but Dash paves